A fundamental question echoes through the void. What is power? In the world, many forms of power exist: martial strength, intellectual cunning, financial authority. But among them all, one radiates a unique and peculiar influence: the power of cuteness. A young man, Suzuki Riku, age 17, finds himself sitting on an ornate dais. Before him stands a celestial being with a halo and wings. She introduces herself as a goddess, informing him that he has been chosen to be reincarnated into the next world. He can only stare in disbelief, uttering a confused "huh." She then gestures to a rough-looking man beside her, explaining that this is Sasaki, who died at the same time and will also be choosing a new life. The man, Sasaki, erupts in anger, demanding to know what is happening and why he is dead. As he struggles with the revelation, the goddess calmly clarifies that he was killed when a drunk driver hit his truck. Turning her attention back to Riku, she states that she will consider the misfortune of his previous life while guiding him to a world of his choosing. Sasaki scoffs, asking if Riku had an unhappy life. He suggests that in a world on the brink of ruin, one should just beat down their enemies. The goddess then formally asks Sasaki for his wish. She proposes sending him to a world with an SS rank difficulty, a truly hellish place, but she will grant him the ultimate overpowered ability. Sasaki grins, readily accepting the offer if she's giving it away. Riku is stunned that such an ability can be given. The goddess adds a condition: he must use the power to defeat the world's enemies and save its people. He roars his acceptance, boasting that he'll make the entire world his servant. With that decided, Riku anxiously asks what will become of it. He quietly reflects on his past life as a loner at school. He confesses that all he really wants is to live peacefully among kind people. The goddess listens intently, consulting her large book. She then makes her offer. He will be sent to an F-rank difficulty world to work as a farmer. His ability will be to be unconditionally loved by the local species. Riku repeats the word loved, taken aback. The goddess suggests this would make it easy for him to blend in. He considers this, imagining a life surrounded by friendly faces, and concedes that it might be true. He enthusiastically accepts the goddess's offer, exclaiming that he'll take it. Beside him, Sasaki is equally thrilled, shouting that he'll conquer this new world. The goddess acknowledges their acceptance, and, with a snap of her fingers, bids them farewell. As she turns away from the now-empty teleportation circle, a brief thought crosses her mind. She couldn't quite remember which of the two was named Suzuki. Riku's consciousness returns in a flash of light. He finds himself sprawled on a cold, stone floor, looking up at a group of imposing figures in armor and robes. A voice declares that the summoning was a success. He pushes himself up, a dawning realization washing over him. This feeling, this place, he was truly in another world. The assembled court observes him with keen interest. An elderly man with a crown and a fur-trimmed robe steps forward, introducing himself as the king of Rylane. He addresses Riku directly, calling him the hero. The title catches Riku completely off guard. A masked figure in dark robes approaches the throne, announcing that the hero's ability scores have been determined. He presents a scroll to the king, who takes it and begins to read. The king's expression sours as he reads the scroll. He announces that Riku's attack power, defense, and magic power are all a mere one. He scoffs, calling him useless trash. Stunned, Riku protests that he isn't trash, that all he ever wanted was to live a quiet, peaceful life. He clutches his head in despair, revealing the kingdom's dire situation. The Demon Lord's army is on the verge of attacking, and they are facing imminent ruin. The mention of a Demon Lord's army sends a jolt of shock through Riku. That is precisely why we need a hero, the king bellows. As he speaks, a sharp, pointed staff is thrust towards Riku's throat. The masked mage is the one wielding the weapon, its tip pressed firmly against Riku's neck, while the king watches with a grim expression. He stood stunned as chaos erupted around him. The king, who had threatened him moments before, now lay dead at the feet of a new enemy. Soldiers screamed warnings of the Demon Lord before being cut down, their cries for retreat silenced by swift, brutal attacks. The throne room's invaders were revealed to be executives from the Demon Lord's army. One, named Kill, taunted the fallen, telling them to be good and let themselves be killed. Her companion, Mel, mockingly asked if they had put up a good fight, only for a stern voice to tell them to stop, deeming their chatter pointless. Their captain, Nefra, stood with one foot planted on a dead soldier's chest, her massive spear held ready. She dismissed the humans as insects, declaring them powerless, and that there was nothing to be learned from them. As the captain spoke, Mel approached Riku, laughing amidst the carnage. She remarked that the humans seemed to have learned from the last battle not to resist. In the background, a soldier cried out in agony, lamenting that not even a fragment of him would remain. Horrified, Riku could only wonder why this was happening. A memory of Sasaki surfaced, a vision of the man grinning, talking about beating down enemies in a chaotic world. The stark contrast between that bravado and his own terror was overwhelming. His mind raced with a terrible possibility. Could the goddess have made such a critical mistake? Did she mean to summon Sasaki, the strong one, but got him instead? The thought was the worst-case scenario. He felt a desperate urge to flee. Overwhelmed by fear, he whispered a single, desperate plea into the blood-soaked air. "Help me." His plea was met with silence. His gaze then fell upon two maids, huddled together in a corner of the grand hall, weeping in utter terror. They were as helpless as he was. Seeing their despair, something inside him shifted. His fear gave way to a grim resolve. He clenched his fist, realizing that if things had come to this, he was the only one who could act. The king had just called him trash, but that no longer mattered. A new certainty took hold. If the goddess truly made a mistake and sent him instead of Sasaki, then it stood to reason that he had been given the overwhelmingly powerful ability that was meant for the other man. He had to have it. He lunges forward with a desperate roar, his fist extended towards the towering demon commander, shouting that if he fights with all his might, even he can make a difference. His punch is stopped effortlessly by Nefra's palm. The sheer audacity of the act leaves another summoned human paralyzed with fear, while the two cat-like demons, Kill and Mel, look on. Mel angrily suggests that the trash should be punished for his insolence. He stares in disbelief at his captured fist. Nefra glares down, declaring that for a mere human to commit such an act is an offense worthy of 10,000 deaths. All hope drains from Riku as he realizes this new life is even more of a dead end than his last. At the very moment Riku resigns himself to death, Nefra, a commander of the Demon Lord's army, finds herself inwardly perplexed and troubled by the situation. Her confusion deepens as she notices the other summoned human, who is now looking at Riku with tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by how incredibly cute he finds him. Riku can only stare back, utterly bewildered. From Nefra's perspective, the boy's delayed approach was strangely endearing. Looking at him again, she finds him impressive. A blush spreads across her cheeks as she tries to dismiss the thought, insisting he is just a common insect, even as she recalls his hand touching her chest. Shaking off her feelings, her grip tightens on her spear. She reminds herself that any human who shows her such disrespect must be killed. Riku watches, his face a mask of pure terror. Yet, as she prepares to deliver the final blow, her resolve crumbles. Sweat beads on her brow, and her face flushes as she realizes she finds it utterly impossible to follow through with the execution. Unable to act, she turns away from Riku to save face before her subordinates. She dismisses her earlier threat of 10,000 deaths as a mere figure of speech, claiming it would be beneath her to accept him as a subordinate now. Kill and Mel exchange a look of confusion, their attention elsewhere. At that same moment, the twin demons were fixated on Nefra's right arm, possessed by a sudden, overwhelming, and inexplicable desire for it. She telepathically chided her partner, Mel, for crying. Mel explained that she had been so moved by their commander's words that she'd blurted out a bizarre request for a solar plexus necklace as punishment, which she now deeply regretted. Kill, exasperated, told her to forget the strange comment and focus on stopping Nefra. As her subordinates argued, Riku stood amidst the fallen, utterly bewildered by the sudden pause in the conflict. His gaze shifted to Nefra, and a dreadful realization dawned on him. She was surely about to kill him. He squeezed his eyes shut and yelled defiantly, demanding she get it over with if she intended to kill him. Nefra looked down at him, her expression hardening as she seemed to agree with his sentiment. Raising her spear, she declared that as a disrespectful human, he had to die. Her subordinates, Kill and Mel, voiced their agreement from his side. Yet she paused. Nefra clarified that while she wouldn't kill him, she had never claimed he was worth 10,000 deaths, a statement that left her subordinates stunned and Riku completely baffled. Growing increasingly flustered, she suddenly shouted about her horns, leaving Riku's mind to drift into a void of utter incomprehension. She composed herself, pointing a decisive finger at the boy. His punishment, she announced, would be something other than death. The sentence was prison. With a commanding shout, she ordered Kill and Mel to seize him and throw him in the castle's dungeon for the night. In response, Kill and Mel immediately flanked the terrified Riku, seizing his arms with gleeful, unsettling enthusiasm as they acknowledged their orders. He tried to protest, but his words were lost on the two cat girls, who leaned in with predatory smiles, ignoring his plea entirely. Still flustered, Nefra shouts a list of strict instructions. He is to be given 3 meals a day, she declares, and snacks are to be served precisely at 3 o'clock. Her mind conjures an image of him as a helpless, pacifier-sucking infant. As she continues, trailing off as she addresses the human, Mel cuts her off with a sharp command not to get attached. Kill watches the exchange silently, while Mel holds Riku firmly. He looks back, confused by the commotion, and offers his name, Suzuki Riku. Nefra, sweating and agitated, repeats that calling him human is too cumbersome and demands he state his name. She quietly mouths his name, Suzuki, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. The name, she considers, has a rather nice ring to it. The young man is utterly baffled by the turn of events. He was supposed to be executed, but instead, he's being promised regular meals and snacks, and now his captors are asking for his name. A sudden, horrifying realization dawns on him. He points at the demon commander, whose name he now recalls as Nefra, and shouts his accusation. She asked for his name so she could use it in a recipe to cook and eat him. Kill leans in close, a sharp-toothed grin on her face, and dismisses his fear. She purrs that no one would do something as cruel as eating him, calling the idea absurd. At this, both she and Mel erupt in laughter, mocking him for being an idiot as he stands mortified. He retorts defensively, reminding them that she had just been talking about making him into a necklace. From the grand hallway ahead, Kill and Mel shout back in unison that humans are not for eating. Mel puts an end to the discussion, and Kill gestures for him to follow. With a sly smile, she invites him to come along to their castle. Sprouting large, demonic wings, the two cat girls seize him by the arms and take flight, dragging him down a long corridor littered with the bodies of fallen soldiers. He cries out for them to wait, but they pull him onward. He dangles precariously in the air, held aloft by the two demons. He shouts that he's going to fall, pleading with them. Below, Nefra calls out for them to wait. She watches them disappear, a frustrated expression on her face as she mutters about the foolishness of Kill and Mel. Nearby, a horned demon maid clutches her hands, her face a mask of frantic jealousy. She shouts that to be able to touch Suzuki in such a way is far too enviable. Her attention snaps back to the present. She wonders if her name reached him amidst the chaos. Standing over the fallen soldiers, she realizes with a sigh that her responsibilities have just grown. As the wind whips around the high castle spires, she quietly speaks her name into the air, as if to ensure it was heard. Nefra. Meanwhile, Riku is carried through a grim, stone passageway. He looks down in confusion, trying to understand what is happening as they pass over the remains of armored soldiers and scattered bones. His flight ends abruptly. He finds himself seated in a surprisingly comfortable armchair, though a heavy ball and chain is shackled to his ankle. One foot soaks in a warm basin, while a platter of fruit sits beside him. He crosses his arms, utterly bewildered by the bizarre circumstances. He watches the other prisoners straining against their bonds, wondering why he alone is being treated so differently. The special attention makes him deeply uneasy. His discomfort grows as two cat-eared maids approach, carrying an enormous pillow, and he questions what they could possibly be thinking. His mind flashes back to the corridor littered with the bodies of fallen soldiers. He concludes that trying to comprehend the motives of beings capable of such carnage is a futile effort. He stares ahead, his expression hardening with grim certainty. He comes to a single, chilling conclusion. No matter what this strange treatment means, he will likely be killed in the end. He reflects on his final memory before reincarnation, a hazy, crimson-tinted view accompanied by the sickening sound of his body breaking. If that was an execution, he muses, then this current situation is far more preferable. He sits shackled on the cold stone floor, a tray of untouched food beside him. A part of him wishes he could live and befriend someone, but he resigns himself to the thought that it was never meant to be. As he sits in despair, his image appears within a crystal orb held by unseen hands. The observer's voice is filled with sorrow, remarking on the cruelty of his fate. The observer is revealed to be the goddess, her face etched with anguish. She calls this her mistake a source of great pain, explaining that the very ability she bestowed upon him is the reason he cannot be returned to his world. She continues, explaining that it is impossible to bring back someone who has already been reincarnated. Not only that, but contact with the celestial realm is forbidden, and even observation is severely restricted. The power she granted him, she realizes, is the ability to be unconditionally loved by the native races of this world. Gazing into the orb, she understands the terrible potential of her gift. Depending on how it is used, this power could become the very root of this world's resentment. Her gaze drifts from the orb to the world below, towards a dark fortress in the mountains. She knows that to grasp the truth of one's own world, one must become a true hero, or something else entirely. Within the orb, Riku shivers, feeling an inexplicable unease, but decides it's better not to think about it. In his cell, Riku's expression hardens with resolve. From afar, the goddess offers a final, unheard encouragement for him to do his best. Under the dark sky, a stone castle stands silent. Somewhere within its walls, a box is opened, and a soft humming sound fills the air. The sound comes from Nefra, leader of the Demon Army's Special Attack Unit, Thunderclap. Having just submitted her report on the conquest of Rylane to the Demon Lord, she strides purposefully through the corridors, humming in anticipation. With her duties complete, she can finally go see Suzuki. She throws open a door, eagerly calling his name. Her face is alight with excitement, desperate to see the handsome Suzuki after a long night of work. However, the room is empty. The cell, comfortably furnished and with a meal left untouched, is vacant. A flicker of confusion crosses her face as she calls out for Suzuki again, her voice now laced with uncertainty. Her call is answered by a skeletal guard who steps into her path. Nefra immediately demands to know who this rookie is, asking what has become of Kill and Mel. The skeleton points at her, questioning what she is doing. He explains that he is a remnant from the previous day's battle. Uninterested, Nefra asks what happened to the humans who were being held here. The guard calmly states that he will handle the situation, as per the instructions in Nefra's own report. The guard continues, reporting that he has moved everyone from this room to the interrogation chambers. He justifies his actions by stating that the occupants were royalty-related personnel, and he was simply following regulations. He then chides her, saying she should have read the newcomer's manual. Nefra's expression hardens. Her patience shatters. In a flash of fury, Nefra drives her fist into the skeleton's face, the impact echoing as his skull cracks and explodes. He crumples to the ground, his head rolling to a stop nearby. Nefra stands over the dismantled guard, Her body tense with rage as she glares down at him. Muttering about the strictness of society, her anger boils over. She screams that one should read the atmosphere before citing regulations. Her thoughts, however, are already on one place: the interrogation rooms. The interrogation rooms are under the jurisdiction of a single, cruel entity known as Rogel. This hooded figure, with a sack covering its head, takes immense pleasure in tormenting its victims, feeding a monstrous appendage into the mouths of humans it has personally captured. This interrogator shows no mercy, not even to women or children, relentlessly continuing the questioning until the captives lose their minds. One man, who had been sent by the king as a supervisor, was subjected to this very fate. It is because of this reputation that Nefra realizes Suzuki is in grave danger. The thought of dealing with such a sadist is a pain, but a necessary one. She turns back to the shattered skeleton guard, demanding to know what it was thinking when it looked at Suzuki. The guard apologizes, offering to check the manual for the name of the torturer in charge. But Nefra has no time for that. She declares that she will go herself, and that the torturer should prepare for her arrival. With that, she breaks into a sprint, calling out to Suzuki that she is on her way to save him. Her thoughts are a desperate plea, hoping with all her being that he remains safe until she can reach him. As she races away, the pieces of the skeleton guard begin to reassemble. The guard notes with surprise how the normally calm and composed Nefra has become so agitated over Suzuki. Meanwhile, inside a cold stone cell, Suzuki sits with his hands bound, a look of fear on his face as he tries to recall the identity of his captor. He is not alone. Another prisoner, a young man with blonde hair, sits huddled in the corner, while the sack-headed interrogator looms in the foreground, preparing his instruments. His eyes widen in horror as he witnesses a fleshy, worm-like appendage slither across the floor and touch the foot of another screaming captive. He can only stare, wondering what monstrous thing he has seen. He had thought himself ready to die, but witnessing such a gruesome method of killing filled him with a new kind of terror. He trembled, watching the monstrous appendage retract from the now-still prisoner. As he recoiled in fear, the blond man beside him spoke, his voice weary. He explained that their captor was merely toying with them, tried to extract information from the demons, and would enjoy the process for as long as possible. The thought of a quick death was a fantasy. This grim reality struck Suzuki hard. A sudden, desperate will to live surged through him as he thought of his parents. The blond man then looked towards the various instruments of torture lining the wall and declared that he would be next. He reasoned that if their captor's goal was simply to pass the time and have fun, he would endure it until they were satisfied, a statement that left Suzuki speechless. He reflected on his own life, how he had always been labeled a bully. Yet in this moment of truth, he felt utterly powerless, unable even to attempt an escape. Turning to the blond man, he voiced a desperate strategy. If the man could endure the torture for as long as possible, it might just buy enough time to increase his own chances of survival. The suggestion hung in the air, surprising his fellow captive. Their grim pact was cut short as the interrogator, Rogel, loomed over them once more, flanked by grotesque, insectoid creatures. The sack-covered head tilted as a muffled voice asked who was next. In an instant, the blond man's resolve shattered. He scrambled back, screaming in terror, pleading to be spared, and promising to pay any amount of money for his freedom. Suzuki watched, stunned by the complete reversal. Annoyed by the outburst, Rogel dismissed him as a nuisance and struck him with a powerful backhand, sending the man flying across the cell. The blond man slumped to the floor, unconscious. Rogel's attention then shifted, their covered face turning directly towards Suzuki. A muffled, "Hey," echoed in the silent room. The interrogator leaned in close, their face just inches from his. A chilling question emerged from behind the sack. "You were watching me just now, weren't you?" Suzuki could only stare back, paralyzed by fear. He stares in wide-eyed terror, his face contorted in fear. The interrogator, Rogel, pinches the bridge of their nose through the sack, expressing frustration. They tell Suzuki that if he didn't want to be there, he shouldn't have been, leaving him to utter a confused sound in response. He gathers his courage, stepping closer to the interrogator despite his bound hands. He demands to know if Rogel is just toying with people for fun, or if they intend to kill him quickly. Rogel remains silent for a moment before flatly denying it. Suzuki presses on, stating that something about them seems off, but Rogel dismisses his concern. Their patience snaps. Rogel roars that they're the one asking the questions here, their voice booming with sudden fury. In a flash of rage, they slam their fist into the stone wall right beside Suzuki's head. The impact shatters the masonry, sending cracks, spiderwebbing outwards as Suzuki stares, speechless, at the display of raw power. He collapses to his knees, overwhelmed and sobbing. The interrogator looks down at him, seemingly taken aback by the reaction, and mutters that they are not very good at conversation. An internal realization strikes them with force. After 30 long years, their first attempt at a proper conversation resulted in them punching a wall out of frustration. Their mind drifts to other times. They recall being viewed with disgust by their own kin, even as they walked with a skeleton guard and a child. They remember holding a large insect, a fly, and musing that while it was a nuisance, at least it wouldn't disobey them. It was no wonder their family found them unsettling. They leaned closer to the weeping boy on the floor. Rogel reflects on their daily routine of playing with humans and insects, admitting to finding immense pleasure in their suffering. Yet this human's reaction was different. Somehow, unexpected. He looks up, tears streaming down his face, but his expression is not one of terror. It is one of profound sorrow and empathy. The interrogator recoils, utterly stunned by this display of compassion. A strange, intense feeling washes over them as they declare the boy's reaction to be adorable. The interrogator, trembling, grabs Suzuki's hood. They demand to know why he's making them feel this way, insisting they've done nothing wrong and pleading with him to stop shaking. Suzuki, wide-eyed, can only stare in shock. In a sudden, frustrated motion, they rip the sack from their head, tossing it at Suzuki. They command him to wipe his tears and snot on it, leaving him utterly stunned. Beneath the mask is a muscular, horned individual with dark skin and striped hair. Their faces flushed in a deep blush as they look down, stammering a question to Suzuki, asking if he was a woman. They continue, clarifying that they are an ogre woman. With a pained expression, she explains that because of her muscular body, she doesn't have a place even among the demon tribe. Suzuki listens in silence. She admits she knows her physique is rugged and masculine, which is why she hides her face and immediately sends away anyone who sees it. Suzuki processes this, then tells her he understands, but he wasn't thinking anything bad. He was just surprised, he says, because he found her cute. His compliment stuns her. Goo. Me, she shouts, accusing him of teasing her. Suzuki vehemently denies it, insisting he truly meant it. He then points out that the sack she wore seemed cheap and poorly ventilated, asking if it was uncomfortable. Leaning forward with earnest intensity, Suzuki shouts that her real face is much better and, in fact, incredibly cute. The directness of his words leaves her speechless. Blushing furiously, she stammers, "Me? Goo?" Really, a wave of pure delight washes over her face. She touches her cheek, a wide, joyful grin spreading from ear to ear as she murmurs how happy she is. Suzuki can only watch, baffled by her euphoric reaction. Her entire demeanor has changed. She declares she's in a great mood and wants to talk more, demanding his name first. He tells her it's Suzuki. Beaming, she introduces herself as Suzuki and exclaims that his name is wonderful. She excitedly presents a large, segmented worm-like creature to Suzuki, declaring it to be her #1 pet, Pochi. She offers the creature to him, but he can only stare, bewildered, as it wiggles in her hands. In response to his unspoken confusion, Suzuki asks for her name. With a burst of energy, she proudly announces that her name is Kiroguru. He quietly repeats the strange name to himself. Kiroguru, meanwhile, dances with glee, insisting that he must not forget it. She then confesses that she's usually terrible at talking to people, but with Suzuki, it's different. She admits that simply looking at him fills her with a happiness she can't explain, leaving Suzuki to wonder why. Suddenly, Kiroguru whips around, her cheerful demeanor replaced by a look of alarm as she senses an approaching presence. Suzuki is startled by her abrupt change. The source of her alarm appears in the doorway. Nefra, her face contorted in pure rage as she seethes, calling out the name Suzuki. Nefra storms towards them, demanding to know what Suzuki is doing in such a place, and questioning if she is even there at all. Her angry advance halts as she gets a proper look at Kiroguru. Nefra's fury instantly melts into a flustered blush as she murmurs that as long as she's safe, everything is fine. Composing herself slightly, Nefra formally asks for the ogre's name. Kiroguru, sweating and completely intimidated, stammers out her own name in response. Seeing Kiroguru's distress, Suzuki steps forward, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. He faces Nefra and makes a desperate plea. Please don't kill this human. His plea is cut short as Nefra declares that the interrogation is over. She commands that Suzuki be taken to the slave quarters. Suzuki, caught off guard, looks up in shock, wondering aloud what a slave quarter is. She turns to him, a bright smile replacing her confusion. She reassures Suzuki that everything is fine, explaining that if she's being interrogated, she won't be eaten, which in her mind makes her the safest human there. Suzuki can only stare, perplexed by her logic. Her relief is palpable as she lies back, content. She tells Suzuki she's glad, but then sternly warns him never to come to this place again for the rest of his life. He watches her, a hesitant and concerned expression on his face. He leans closer, whispering a request. He asks her to agree to end the interrogations for both their sakes, confessing that he doesn't want to see her get hurt any more than she already has. Suzuki looks at him, surprised by his earnestness. His words hang in the air. To convince her, he makes a solemn vow. If she promises to stop, he will absolutely come to see her again. The declaration strikes Suzuki with force, her face a mask of stunned hope. Their private moment is interrupted. From the doorway, Nefra, flanked by Kill and Mel, demands to know what they're doing and tells them to hurry. The two cat girls realize their eavesdropping has been discovered, while Suzuki flushes with embarrassment. She doesn't hesitate. Overwhelmed with joy, Suzuki lunges forward, pulling Suzuki into a tight, crushing hug. She shouts that she understands, declaring it an absolute promise. Suzuki is caught completely by surprise, his face pressed into her shoulder. He is enveloped in her embrace, blushing as he notes the warmth of her chest. But he can't deny the feeling. Beside him, Suzuki laughs with pure, unadulterated delight. The display of affection does not go unnoticed. A sudden, Intense chill runs down Nefra's back as she watches them. In the foreground, Suzuki begins to sweat, sensing the menacing shift in the atmosphere. Her voice cuts through the tension, warning them to stop dawdling lest they hear about it later. As Suzuki is led away, Suzuki waves a final goodbye. He reflects with some relief that he has managed to leave the interrogation room unharmed. He walks alongside Nefra, his gaze falling upon a pair of dejected, shackled prisoners. The sight seems to confirm a grim thought he'd been entertaining, that this cruel world was fundamentally unchangeable. As if reading his mind, Nefra flatly identifies their location as the slave quarters. His attention is then drawn to another cell, where 3 more captives sit among straw on the stone floor. It is this very encounter, in this bleak place, that is destined to change his world in a profound way. One of the prisoners, a young woman with long, light hair and a heavy collar around her neck, looks up. Her eyes widen slightly as she speaks a single, questioning title. Hero. Nefra gestures towards a bleak, stone-walled cell filled with despondent prisoners. Suzuki Riku stares in shock at the scene before him. A collection of defeated humans, including the captive heroine and the blonde man he'd seen before. Nefra informs him that this is his new home, the slave pen. She continues, admitting that she would much rather keep him in her own room, but circumstances require patience. She tells him to endure it until the day of selection. Confused, Riku repeats the phrase back to her as a question. Nefra explains that the day of selection is the day when it is decided which demon a slave will serve, and that it is 1 week away. She then presents him with a small, dark, bell-shaped object on a cord, instructing him to ring it if he runs into any trouble. He rejects the item with a shout, declaring that he doesn't need it. He vows that in 1 week, he will burn everyone in the tower to ash, sparing only the humans. Nefra seems merely amused by his outburst, remarking on a large amount of magic she used to create the bell for him before telling him to do as he pleases. With that, she turns and walks away, leaving him locked behind the cell door. As she departs, she thinks to herself that she doesn't care if he wants her later. She will do as she pleases. From behind the bars, Riku calls out her name in frustration. He watches her depart, realizing she must be one of them. He calls out again, a simple, demanding hey. His shout, however, attracts unwanted attention. 2 other prisoners turn to face him, and the one in front, a man with a goatee and a thick collar, aggressively demands to know what he's yelling about. The man presses his interrogation, asking what country Riku is from. Before Riku can answer, the other prisoner, a younger man with spiky blonde hair, points out that Riku has a black pupil, noting that it's a rumor he's heard. The goateed man's expression darkens with understanding. Instead of responding to the observation, the goateed man lashes out, striking the spiky-haired blonde prisoner hard across the face. His fury then finds a new target. He grabs Riku by the front of his hoodie, slamming him back. He furiously asks if Riku is the useless hero the royal family summoned. He screams that because the hero is useless, all the citizens are being eaten, demanding that Riku take responsibility and die. As he lay pinned, his assailant's attention was diverted. An older, bald prisoner knelt before a captive young woman, addressing her as princess. The goateed man, still holding Riku down, snarled at her to stop whatever she was doing. The goateed man scoffed at the title, but the blonde prisoner nearby confirmed it. He identified the young woman as Excella, the 3rd princess of the Rylane Kingdom. Hearing this, a cruel sneer spread across the goateed man's face. He mocked the idea of a former princess whose country was destroyed by the very hero they had summoned. He vowed to make all 3 of them pay for it. He lunged, not at Riku, but directly at the princess, shouting that he would start with her. The old prisoner cried out her name and tried to intervene, but was violently shoved aside. The blonde man yelled at the old one to be quiet. Pinning her against the wall, he began tearing at her clothes. He raged that heavy taxes had been levied on the common people to fund the defense against the demon tribe, and this miserable state was the result. As royalty, he screamed, she must take responsibility for her people's suffering. As he continued his assault, Princess Excella struggled, crying out for help while her attacker grinned with malice. Her cries reached Riku, who, still on the ground, demanded that the man stop and release her. The goateed prisoner whirled around, enraged, questioning who Riku thought he was and telling him to just die quietly. He gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his face. A single, defiant thought burned in his mind. He absolutely refused to be killed by another human. Meanwhile, the blonde man watched the chaos, his eyes wide with panic. He wondered why he was being blamed for everyone else's suffering, reasoning that as a fellow human, he should be understood. The goateed man scoffed that the useless hero should just lie there for the rest of his life. In that moment, Riku surged forward, grabbing his attacker's arm and twisting it with sudden, unexpected force. He tightens his grip on the man's arm, his intervention stopping the assault cold. The goateed prisoner stares in disbelief, his rage momentarily forgotten, while Princess Excella looks on with wide-eyed shock. As he holds the aggressor at bay, the princess explains that she had learned self-defense techniques as part of her royal training, but never imagined a day would come when she would have to use them in a real conflict. With the immediate threat neutralized, she turns to her defender, formally thanking him for his help. She introduces herself as Excella, the 3rd princess of the Rylane Kingdom, a name that seems to strike a chord with Riku. Their exchange is interrupted by a frantic shout. A woman with animal-like ears rushes towards them, calling out the name, Ornio, and anxiously asking about someone else. Excella quickly tells her not to worry about the princess. Just then, the old prisoner from before steps in, gently restraining the agitated woman, Ornio. He identifies himself as a retainer to the princess, stating with grim resolve that his duty is to be prepared to die for her. Later, inside their shared cell, the group listens as Riku explains his origins. He confirms to a surprised Excella that he is a reincarnated person from another world. She presses further, asking if he was reborn as a holy person by a goddess, but he quickly dismisses the idea. She then reveals her own story, explaining that she, too, was chosen by the goddess and granted a second life. Because of this, she declares with confidence, she is undoubtedly a holy person. Hearing this, Riku's expression darkens. He quietly admits that he was supposed to have been reincarnated into a different world entirely, a confession that brings the old retainer to tears. He elaborates, a bitter smile on his face, revealing that his intended destination was a peaceful, idyllic world where he could live a quiet life. He recounts the goddess's words. Because he had wished to defeat his enemies in his past life, she granted him the strongest power. Now, he feels the weight of responsibility, believing that without his support, this world cannot be saved. He mentions a specific ability, one that is unconditionally loved by the people of the land, prompting the old retainer to ask exactly what power he had sought. He explains that at first, he didn't believe he had any special ability, since every person he met was hostile. The demon race was different, but he couldn't understand why. After much thought, he finally confirmed the truth of it today. His expression is fraught with intensity as he reveals the power he received, to be unconditionally loved. But, he clarifies with frustration, it is limited only to the demon race. The old prisoner cries out in disbelief. Riku turns away, admitting he doesn't know the specific reason for the limitation. He only knows that because of it, the demons won't kill him without cause and seem to enjoy simply speaking with him. The man questions if such a thing is even possible. Excella, her gaze thoughtful, suggests it must be the power of the goddess. Riku seems unsure, but then laments that with such a power, he can't even protect himself. Riku stands alone, his posture defeated. He confesses that while his ability allowed him to avoid torture and execution, he was completely unable to do anything for the other captured humans. His words are proven true by the sight of two other prisoners tied back to back to a post. One of them confirms that Riku is, as he said, powerless. The memory of his confrontation with the demon army to protect Excella flashes through his mind. He asks her if she remembers the two maids who were in the royal chamber, his face twisting with bitterness as he recalls being treated like a child's plaything. He looks down, sweat beading on his face, and admits that in the end, he was completely unable to make a difference. She quickly refutes this, a gentle smile on her face. Excella tells him that because of the opening he created back then, two people were not captured and killed. Rika stares at her, stunned, asking if she is telling the truth. She continues, explaining that when they were sent to this place, the maids who were with them taught them many things. She reveals that those two maids are now living in a separate slave dormitory. She explains to a stunned Riku that this life, hers, is one that he saved. She continues, clenching her fist, lamenting that while the great deeds of heroes are remembered, the sacrifices of those they couldn't save are forgotten. With tears welling in her eyes, she confesses that it was his courage that gave her the strength to act when she had been frozen in despair. His eyes widen as her words sink in, her voice filled with gratitude as she tells him how truly glad she is that he was there. Overcome with emotion, she finally lets out a heartfelt thank you. In response, Rika looks down, his hand tightening into a fist, processing her gratitude. He then turns to face Excella, Ornio, and the old prisoner, his resolve hardening. He asks them to teach him. Grabbing the front of his shirt with intensity, he implores them to teach him about this world, to think alongside him, and to help him figure out what he is capable of doing. His passionate plea leaves Excella and the old man momentarily stunned, their expressions shifting to ones of hope. The old man joyfully exclaims his title, Hero. Excella readily agrees, declaring it a matter of course. She takes his hand, sealing their pact, and asks for his cooperation so they can change the world together. Several hours later, at a dark castle, two executives of the Demon Lord's army, Kill and Mel, grumble about having been scolded. She fumes, clenching her fists. The sight of a mere skeleton soldier, the very one who escorted Suzuki to the interrogation room on his second day, is an insult. She silently vows to grind the skeletal guard to dust later for daring to lay a hand on him. Her companions, Mel and another feline executive, are shaken. Mel remarks that it's the first time she's ever seen Nefra scold them so harshly, and the other agrees it was terrifying. Despite the reprimand, Mel expresses her relief that Suzuki is safe, but her companion seems skeptical. Kill interjects, stating that according to the slave register, Suzuki has entered Nefra's personal chambers and that she intends to see him. As she speaks, her eyes widen. Down the long corridor, she spots Suzuki himself, walking alongside a massive armored guard. She shouts his name in disbelief, and he turns, recognizing Kill and Mel. The three of them rush toward him. Kill immediately demands to know why he is in the executive wing of the Demon Lord Castle. The armored guard steps in, apologizing for the intrusion. He explains that Nefra had business with Suzuki and that he was merely escorting him back. The guard adds that he knows they were worried, but assures them Suzuki is fine. Suzuki confirms the guard's account. Unconvinced, Kill presses him, asking what kind of business Nefra could possibly have with him. His response is not what she expected. With a bright, earnest expression, Suzuki places a hand over his heart and makes a stunning declaration. He wants to become Nefra's exclusive slave. The announcement renders the three executives speechless, their minds reeling in confusion. Elsewhere, a horned demoness pauses her writing, a similarly bewildered expression crossing her face. In a well-appointed room, Suzuki Riku stands before Nefra, flanked by Kill and Mel. He looks directly at the seated demon commander and makes a clear, unwavering declaration. He wants to become her slave. She stares back, her expression unreadable. He watches her, his own face a mask of hopeful anxiety, silently pleading that his offer won't be rejected. Her stoic facade shatters internally. While her physical form trembles, covering her face with one hand, her mind conjures images of herself celebrating wildly, complete with party poppers and triumphant shouts of joy. She struggles to regain her composure, prompting a concerned Suzuki Riku to ask what's wrong. Flustered, Nefra dismisses his concern, telling him to wait and blaming her reaction on the recent overwhelming workload. She continues to lecture herself internally, trying to calm down. As the squad captain, she cannot lose her dignity. She reminds herself that the selection of slaves is a formal process, decided by a council, and that everything must follow the rules. Besides, she had her own reasons for bringing him here in the first place. Her internal monologue is cut short as she glances at a document detailing the very squad rules she was just thinking about. A space for her approval signature is clearly visible. She grits her teeth in frustration. Despite the regulations, she decisively dips a quill in ink. With determined strokes, she signs the document, but not before adding a small, crucial amendment to the text. A clause exempting the squad captain. With the loophole secured, she holds up the newly amended document with a beaming, triumphant smile. She declares that there is no problem. Just then, the Catgirl executive arrives with Suzuki Riku. She explains that while such a decision is normally reserved for the squad captain's discretion, Nefra holds that very rank, so she will accept his application. Overjoyed, Riku asks if it's true. Nefra confirms it, then asks what he wants. He replies that in exchange for becoming her slave, he has a small request. He elaborates on his condition. He wants the slaves to be treated kindly, without violence, by their master. He specifically mentions one girl, Excella. Nefra's expression turns thoughtful as she processes the name, murmuring to herself, Excella, the princess of the ogre tribe. She reflects on the recent events. To prevent Suzuki from being overlooked, he was offered up as a sacrifice. Yet, among all the potential slaves, he was the one who stood out. She looks down at him and agrees to his terms, stating that she will keep his request in mind. If it makes Suzuki happy, she thinks to herself, then it is fine. Riku, ecstatic, celebrates internally, having achieved his first objective. Having secured his position, he discusses strategy with Ornio and the old man. The three of them plan how to best use their abilities, intending to become Nefra's slaves in order to infiltrate the demon tribe. He enthusiastically explains his hope that if they build a good relationship, his request will be granted, eventually leading to a day where demons and humans can live in peace. He thanks Nefra profusely. Flustered, she brushes off his gratitude, stating that for now, their safety is assured and that's what matters. As she speaks, Kill and Mel appear at the doorway to bid them goodnight. Nefra then announces that it's late and time for them to sleep, and Riku agrees. She then turns to him, declaring that as her slave, he is to sleep right there with her. The command leaves him utterly shocked. Despite his shock, he finds himself in her chambers, though in a separate bed. While he sleeps, Nefra lies awake, her eyes fixed on him. She quietly gets out of her own bed, wondering if he is truly asleep. She creeps over to his bedside, telling herself she will just take a quick look. Leaning over him, she sees his face, peaceful and serene in sleep. The sight of his sleeping face sends her into a state of internal chaos. She is overwhelmed by how cute she finds him, filled with an intense desire to hug and cuddle him. While another part of her is visibly frustrated by her own reaction. She struggled with her thoughts, trying to deny her feelings. Suzuki's charm, she insisted to herself, was not something to be sullied by anyone else. It was a treasure she alone could appreciate, a possessiveness that felt almost like a demon god's worship. Despite her internal conflict, she slowly crept from her bed. She reasoned that a small indulgence would be acceptable. After all, she was a demon. She knelt beside him, her hand gently brushing his hair. As she drew closer, she became aware of his scent. The touch, or perhaps the morning light filtering through the window, stirred him from his sleep. He sat up abruptly, realizing he had dozed off. He found it strange. Despite being in an unfamiliar land, sleeping beside a powerful demon, he had rested soundly. It had only been a few days since his reincarnation, yet the whirlwind of events felt immense. Still, he felt a sense of calm. His moment of reflection was shattered when he turned to find Nefra looming directly over him, her expression intense and a trail of drool at the corner of her mouth. A terrified scream erupted from his throat, a sound so loud it seemed to echo from the very towers of the castle. The sudden outburst startled Nefra as well. He scrambled backward across the floor, shouting that he was about to be eaten. Nefra, her composure broken, snapped back, ordering him to calm himself. As his panic subsided, he noticed his body felt different. Nefra explained that he had suffered numerous bruises on his head, chest, and abdomen. Fearing the injuries would worsen if left untreated, she had used a recovery potion on him. The realization that his wounds were real and had been healed dawned on him. She asked when he had sustained such injuries. Still sitting on the floor, he looked up at her, first offering an apology and then a sincere thank you. He sat bolt upright in bed, a sudden panic seizing him. The trouble he'd witnessed among the human prisoners flashed through his mind. He had been so exhausted that he'd fallen asleep right before the scheduled execution. This was a terrible situation. After he explained the situation to Nefra, she simply acknowledged it. As she walked away from his bed, she informed him that from now on, he would be responsible for managing the master slaves. He could only stare after her, wondering if he had managed to gloss over the severity of the events. With that, Nefra went to sleep without any apparent worries. Suzuki, on the other hand, was burdened by too many anxieties to find any rest. The night passed slowly. 3 days later, he awoke feeling much more settled. A sense of familiarity had replaced his fear as he greeted the morning. He lay back, realizing that Nefra hadn't come for him at all, leading to a surprisingly peaceful time. The futon was remarkably comfortable, a small mercy in this strange new world. He noted that it was already daytime. His thoughts continued to drift. Nefra was taking care of most things for him. She was a good cook, and she handled the bath and cleaning with her magic. He concluded that he was essentially free to move about the castle as he pleased. As he walked through the castle grounds, he found this to be true. The demons around him were all kind. Ornio, now free and wearing a dark cloak, greeted him with excitement, happy to see him up and about. He shyly returned the pleasantries. The friendly reception made him realize his situation. This wasn't the life of a slave. It was more like being a guest. Later, back in his room, he sat on the edge of the bed. Nefra had mentioned she was working late and hadn't returned yet. A flicker of loneliness passed through him, but he quickly shook his head, dismissing the feeling as inappropriate. His brief melancholy was replaced by firm resolve. He remembered his promise to Excella. He would not simply accept this comfortable life. He would do what he could for this world. He spent his time in the demon castle's courtyard, diligently hand-washing laundry in a large metal tub. The simple, manual labor feels a world away from the life he once knew. His concentration is broken by a sudden call. From atop a nearby wall, Kill and Mel spot him, cheerfully asking what he is doing. He explains that he's just doing some laundry. Kill seems perplexed, suggesting he could accomplish the task in an instant with cleaning magic. Wringing out a shirt, Riku replies that doing things like this by hand feels important and satisfying. As he walks away from the clothesline, he reflects that he might be starting to understand Mel's feelings, developing a sense of camaraderie with the demons. Just then, Mel calls out, telling him that since he's finished, she wants him to come see something. Meanwhile, Ornio stands before a grand, eye-adorned door, announcing with a grin that she has a handmade present from Mel. With a determined cry, she prepares to enter. She bursts in, excitedly presenting Riku with a brand new hoodie. It's a replica of his old one, but with different colors. Ornio explains that she has a hobby of sewing and used his original hoodie as a pattern. Riku stares, stunned, realizing it's a copy of his own garment. He becomes flustered, insisting it's all right since he was given new clothes. The horned demon girl with Ornio remarks that it was a good thing they found those two guys. Ornio looks over, questioning who she means. The conversation shifts as Riku, now in a different room with Kill and Mel, asks about the other prisoners. He gestures towards a door, inquiring if only the old man and the girl are in that room, wondering where the other man is. Ornio, overhearing, chimes in with a bright, cheerful smile. She asks if he means the human named Suzuki who beat him up, then casually states that there's no way someone like that could still be alive. A cold sweat breaks out on Riku's face as the implication sinks in. Kill and Mel adopt grim expressions. Kill clarifies that, of course, they would never want to enslave or hurt anyone who would dare to harm Suzuki. Riku can only stare in silent horror. He reeled internally from the revelation. While Ornio tried to get his attention, noting that the food was getting cold, Riku's mind raced. He had been completely exposed to Nefra's true nature, and his own lies felt insignificant in comparison. He came to a grim conclusion. This world was the absolute worst. This chasm between them, human and demon, was a gap that could never be bridged. He wondered, with a bead of sweat tracing his temple, if it was truly acceptable to simply be a slave, just for now. He shot to his feet, startling Ornio. Apologizing, he declared he had to leave and thanked her for the hoodie before turning away, convinced that a day where humans and demons could live in peace would never come. Sometime later, the tense atmosphere had shifted. Riku now sat in silence opposite Nefra at a dinner table in a well-appointed room. Outside the castle walls, laundry hung drying in the breeze. A steaming platter of cooked meat sat between them. Nefra's voice cut the silence, asking what was wrong. He assured her the food was delicious and that she was a skilled cook, prompting a small celebration from Kill and Mel in the background. He then mused that he'd heard meat was a human's favorite food, but perhaps it didn't suit him. Nefra dismissed his concern, stating that tomorrow he would be with her for the entire day. She then changed the subject, informing him that an inspection from the main castle was coming. The visitor would be Lord Selfiano, of the demon army staff. Rika looked up, surprised by the mention of a main castle and the demon army staff. She explained that their current location was merely a temporary residence, established to control the area around the conquered Rylane kingdom. The true main castle was located elsewhere, and Lord Selfiano was coming to inspect the state of the subjugated nation. She told him not to be so tense, adding with a smile that she wanted to introduce him to Lord Selfiano, whom she called an amazing person. Rika broke into a cold sweat, his mind screaming. This was all just different levels of hell. To illustrate her point, Nefra begins to recount a story to him. She speaks of a past event during the invasion of the human kingdom of Quirce. The demon army special forces had the upper hand, but they were stalled by a single, powerful human sorcerer. She continues, explaining that the demon soldiers were caught in the sorcerer's spell, completely unaware of the deception. However, Nefra adds with a smirk that sorcerer's power was nothing compared to Lord Selfiano's third eye. She then agrees with Riku's unspoken thought, confirming that yes, this is a true story. The tale describes how the human sorcerer used their magic to make the demon soldiers believe that humans and demons were on good terms. But Lord Selfiano saw through the illusion in an instant. With a single gesture, she dispelled the magic affecting the soldiers and, with their forces restored, proceeded to annihilate the entire country. As the story concludes, a horrifying realization dawns on Riku. He stammers, recognizing that the sorcerer's ability is identical to his own. Nefra, annoyed by his panic, snaps at him to stop worrying about others when his own life is on the line. At that very moment, a carriage rattles along a rugged path. The driver, a burly demon with an eye patch, barks in order to make the dragon-like beasts pull the carriage faster. Inside, the passenger is revealed. Demon Army Staff Officer Selfiano. She remarks that a powerful and troublesome human is getting closer. Speaking to her companion, a man with a demonic third eye on his forehead, she declares that pests should be dealt with quickly. In a well-appointed room, Lord Selfiano formally welcomes Nefra, thanking her for making the long journey. Nefra sits opposite her, a cup of tea resting on the table between them. The journey had indeed been arduous. Nefra expresses her gratitude for being allowed to travel through the night in a carriage pulled by a winged, reptilian beast. Returning to the present, Selfiano changes the subject, informing Nefra that she has a report to share. Nefra appears taken aback by the sudden shift in topic, while Selfiano smiles with confidence. As she sips her tea, Nefra questions the new information, asking if the initial plan wasn't to simply annihilate all the humans within the castle. Selfiano confirms this, but explains her reasoning for the change. She states that while their troops are elite, many are still inexperienced. Since the humans of this country are numerous but harmless, they present a perfect opportunity for training exercises. She then delivers a critical piece of intelligence. The skill known as Thunderclap Dash is already under the enemy's control. Selfiano concludes that this is likely a powerful charm-type skill, a revelation that visibly startles Nefra. Elsewhere, in a chamber with a checkered floor, a bald mage senses the disturbance. He recognizes the power as similar to that of the sorcerer from the Cleveland Kingdom, but notes that the current wave of energy is on a scale he has never felt before. A glowing, eye-like symbol manifests on Selfiano's forehead. Through this power, she declares that she sees everything and that the Demon Lord's army will soon pay a visit. She vows to kill them with supreme agony at their next encounter before dismissing the vision. The vision ends, and Selfiano is once again calmly sipping her tea. Just then, Suzuki Riku enters the room carrying a tray, apologizing for having forgotten to bring the extra sweets early. Without warning, Selfiano's teacup shatters in her hand. Her face contorts in agony as she lets out a piercing scream, crying out the name, Rasa. She suddenly recovers, her face flushed as she leans against Suzuki Riku, startling him. Nefra watches in disbelief as Selfiano apologizes for her rudeness, explaining that she accidentally drank her family's traditional something. Riku, completely flustered, demands to know what has happened. He backs away as Selfiano, seemingly in a state of bliss, marvels at his cuteness. She realizes that the momentary pain of the backlash was nothing. The source of his power is undeniable. He is the one she has been looking for. Unsettled, Riku considers killing her after he gets what he needs, but for now, he orders Nefra to bring something to treat her. He offers her a small packet, apologizing for his inability to use magic and urging her to tell him if she is in pain. Selfiano, still sweating and looking up at him, seems to be in a daze. His concern grows, and he begins to question if she is truly malevolent. Selfiano reassures him with a laugh, but then suddenly erupts in a bizarre, joyful shout, declaring that she is lost to his overwhelming cuteness and vitality. As he reels from her strange declaration, Nefra steps in. She announces her intention to take Suzuki Riku to the underground fighting arena at once. Selfiano immediately objects, forbidding Nefra from allowing him or any other demonkin to enter. Nefra stares, utterly bewildered by the contradictory command. She questions what Selfiano means, only to be told to simply obey. Selfiano clutches her head, realizing with alarm that her mind is being eroded by his charm. She understands she must stop her own demonkin followers before it's too late. Witnessing this internal struggle, Nefra urgently commands her subordinates to act quickly, roaring for them to kill him. The scene shifts to a vast, empty underground arena, its stone tiers silent and waiting. Moments later, Nefra leads Suzuki Riku through a heavy, ornate door into the arena grounds. He asks her to wait, but she seems tense, muttering to herself about being nervous in Selfiano's presence. She stops at the edge of the fighting floor, leaving him alone in the center of the vast coliseum. With a final word, she announces her departure. Elsewhere, Nefra mused on recent events. She found Lord Selfiano to be unexpectedly direct with her desires, and while she approved of the Lord taking a liking to the boy, Selfiano herself seemed overwhelmed, declaring the situation to be too much. She walked on alone down a long stone corridor, questioning the decision to use the underground fighting arena. A part of her wondered if she should have stayed behind. Meanwhile, back in the vast, empty arena, Suzuki Riku desperately called out, pleading for Selfiano to wait. His plea was met with a sudden, invisible force that hurled him backward, sending him crashing to the stone floor. Scrambling, he looked up to see Selfiano standing at a distance. She issued a dire warning. If he dared to approach her, she would destroy the entire castle. He protested, confused, stating that he was only doing as he was told, to wait quietly. He couldn't comprehend why a mere otherworlder with abilities would provoke such a reaction. She countered that the waves of power he emitted were impossible for her to ignore. While she knew this country had summoned a hero, she never imagined a living murder weapon would be the result. With a confident smirk, she added that she could say whatever she pleased. She elaborated on her threat, revealing that every demon within the castle was under her direct control. With a single command, she could have him killed. Pointing a finger at him, she seemed to be struggling, urging for the deed to be done quickly. But the command never came. Instead, she suddenly arched backward, letting out an ecstatic cry. Riku watched in alarm, calling her name and demanding to know what was happening to her. Her own power turned against her. Magical, glowing chains erupted and bound her arms, pulling them taut. She struggled, realizing with horror that her own mind was being consumed by a murderous impulse, forcing her to physically restrain herself to keep from attacking. Suzuki Riku, seeing the chains manifest around Selfiano, is momentarily stunned. The realization of his peril hits him, and he bolts, convinced he's about to be captured. He glances back, shouting in confusion at the bizarre sight of the demon Lord binding herself. Selfiano continues to strain against her own magical restraints, her body trembling with the effort. She grits her teeth, explaining through strained breaths that while she has managed to control her body's movements against her will, his pitifully cute appearance is only intensifying the maddening impulse in her mind. With a surge of power, she declares her solution. By sealing her third eye with this very core, she can achieve a complete nullification of his power. A translucent, magical cube emblazoned with a complex sigil materializes around her head as Riku watches in disbelief. The magical construct dissipates, leaving her standing calmly, the violent impulse seemingly gone. She states that a true mage never relies on a single technique and announces her intention to prove it. Riku, catching his breath, observes that her strange reaction has ceased, wondering if she now perceives him as completely powerless. In response to his unspoken question, Selfiano raises her hand and chants an incantation. Come fort, golem. The ground before Riku shatters as a colossal figure of rock and earth claws its way to the surface. She looks down upon her creation, dismissing it as a mindless doll that only obeys the one who forged it. With a quiet, firm command, she orders it go. The stone construct turns its attention to Suzuki Riku, its directive clear. Crush and kill the human standing before it. Riku's face contorts in terror as the massive creature looms over him. It raises a fist the size of a boulder and brings it crashing down. Riku desperately throws himself aside, the impact pulverizing the stone floor where he had just been standing. The golem remains kneeling for a moment, its stone fist buried in the cratered ground, radiating pure, unthinking murderous intent. As the stone construct loomed, Suzuki Riku's mind flashed back to his arrival in this world. He recalled facing Nefra, her spear pointed at him, and being certain that he was about to be killed. He now understood that Nefra and the others never truly intended to kill him. Their actions were different from those of others he had faced, like the interrogator with the sack over his head, who genuinely wanted to murder him. Riku realized that his own brave actions in the past weren't born of his own courage. He had simply been moved to act by the murderous intent directed at him. His thoughts snapped back to the present, to the towering golem before him. He was paralyzed, certain that this time, death was unavoidable. From a short distance, Selfiano watched with a faint smile, remarking that she was truly glad he was there. He desperately questioned himself, wondering if he was satisfied with what he had accomplished in this world. The answer was a resounding no. A silent scream erupted from within him. He still wanted to live. As the golem's massive stone fist descended upon him, Selfiano suddenly intervened. She lunged forward, shattering the construct's arm with a single, devastating blow, sending fragments of rock flying everywhere. She stood amidst the rubble, muttering about dispelling the technique. From the ground, a bewildered Riku could only call out her name in confusion. She clutched her head, admitting that she had lost control of her senses. She hadn't been in her right mind. He scrambled to his feet and rushed towards her, calling her name again. Selfiano collapsed, but as she fell, she turned to him with a wide, almost manic laugh, remarking on how cute his voice was. And just like that, the confrontation ended, not by his hand, but by her own will. Riku cradled her limp body, begging her to stop as blood trickled from her mouth. Her face, even in this state, was serene and beautiful. Later, while being debriefed, Riku tried to explain the impossible situation to a frantic Nefra. She stared at him in disbelief, demanding to know why he hadn't stopped it and shouting that Selfiano couldn't die. Riku, flustered, could only ask what she expected him to know, as Nefra herself seemed to possess some knowledge he lacked. She explains that Lord Selfiano was simply enjoying her time with Suzuki and, getting carried away, let the golem run rampant. Riku, stunned, questions if that's truly what happened. Looking down at the injured Selfiano, he quickly agrees to keep the matter quiet to protect her reputation, urging her not to speak while she's bleeding. Nefra observes his flustered state and agrees not to press the issue further. She then brings up another matter, addressing Suzuki directly. She states that she has heard he is working towards a world where humans and demons can coexist as equals, asking if this is true. His attention shifts to a memory of Selfiano, who weakly declared her defeat. She assured him she bore him no ill will, but warned that she could not allow the pride of the demon race to be diminished. Alarmed, Riku had quickly insisted that he had no such intention. Kneeling beside her in that moment, he had reflected on the tragedy of them killing each other over a misunderstanding. A faint smile had touched Selfiano's lips. She had mused internally that if humans and demons could truly live in peace, she would be greatly relieved. Recounting this memory, Riku explains to Nefra that Selfiano had smiled and agreed with him. He then notices Nefra's dissatisfied expression and asks what she finds so disagreeable. She dismisses his hopeful interpretation with a wave of her hand, calling it a fanciful story that could never be realized. The realization dawns on Riku that Selfiano was laughing at his naivete. Nefra elaborates, stating that she has often overlooked his requests because she sees him as merely human, claiming her actions are for his own benefit. She concludes by stating that before this, he was nothing more than an insignificant human, completely beneath her notice. He listens as Nefra presses her point, her gaze sharp. She questions if he truly fails to understand that war, for them, is a matter of invasion and conquest, killing humans to seize their resources. She then turns the logic on its head, asking if he believes the outcome would be any different if the summoned heroes were the ones doing the conquering. His hands tighten, bunching the fabric of his trousers. He mutters that he knows, he understands. He understands because it is the truth he has been forced to confront ever since arriving in this world. Memories flash through his mind, the suffering of his fellow prisoners, the despair in their eyes. The images continue to flood his thoughts, the anguish of the humans and the undisguised malice of the demons. It is a cycle so powerful, so unyielding, that he can see no hope of breaking it. But still, he cries out, his voice raw with defiance. He turns to face Nefra, his eyes blazing. He declares that he has made his decision. He is tired of standing by, powerless to do anything. He will change this world in his own way. Nefra looks on, baffled by his outburst. She asks what he is even talking about, reminding him that she just explained why it is impossible. She dismisses his words as merely hating the feeling of helplessness. But Riku believes that within his own sphere of influence, the possibility is not zero. Her expression shifts. She tells him to stop being a slave and instead enlist in the Reigo Shisu. The proposal catches him completely off guard. She elaborates on the offer. If he becomes a member of the squad, he will be granted his own slaves and territory. The higher his rank, the greater his authority and privileges will become. How he chooses to wield that power, she concludes, will be entirely up to him. She continued her explanation, suggesting that within their own territory, it might even be possible for him to build his ideal world. However, she made it clear that to humans the Reigo Shisu, are the enemy, just as humans are to them. Riku listened, his expression a mixture of shock and contemplation. With her offer laid bare, she extended her hand toward him, her gaze intense. She posed the final question. Even knowing all this, would he take her hand? He stared at her outstretched hand, sweat beading on his face. A storm of conflict raged within him. He honestly didn't know if this was the right choice to make. She watched his hesitation, her eyes narrowing slightly. She understood the hatred he must feel for her, and because of that very fact. But then, with a surge of resolve, Riku lunged forward and grasped her hand with both of his. He looked up at her, his voice filled with desperate conviction, and pleaded for her to let him join the Reigo Shisu. His plea marked a turning point. From that moment on, everything began to shift. That decision set in motion a great change in Suzuki's environment. It was in the turbulent space between the demons and the captive humans that the true value of his ability would begin to be demonstrated. Standing on a castle balcony before a massive crowd of demons, Suzuki Riku, flanked by Nefra, Kill, and Mel, makes an announcement. He introduces himself as Suzuki and declares his intention to join their unit, the Reiba Kasu. As he thanks them for gathering, the crowd murmurs with anticipation. With determined eyes and clenched fists, he shouts for them to please welcome him into their ranks. His declaration sends ripples of shock through the crowd, with a skeleton guard and others questioning a human joining their unit. Nefra, observing the reaction, coolly asks if there are any objections. In response, the demons erupt into a massive cheer, shouting that if it's Suzuki, he is more than welcome. Kill and Mel leap into the air, celebrating the crowd's enthusiastic approval. Later, Suzuki expresses his relief to the goateed prisoner, remarking that his abilities are useful after all, just as Excella had said. The other man, however, gives him stark advice: refuse. Elsewhere, hidden in a forest, a powerful lizard-man warrior scoffs from a tree branch. He considers a human joining the demon army to be an eyesore. He drops to the ground, and Suzuki, who is nearby, turns sharply. The young man immediately senses that this demon's presence is fundamentally different from the others he has encountered. He feels a wave of pure, unadulterated killing intent, the very same sensation he experienced when facing the stone golem. The scene shifts back to Nefra, who dismisses Suzuki's concerns. She states that everyone else is in agreement, and, as the leader, her decision is final. She orders everyone to proceed with their training and duties, specifically telling the bronze class members to request training from Suzuki. Sometime later, while standing on a wooden platform on the castle ramparts, Suzuki is called over by a skeleton guard who urges him to hurry. He found himself suddenly surrounded by a motley crew of demonic soldiers. The skeleton guard, now sporting a mustache, informed him that for the time being, he would be training with them. A goblin-like creature formally welcomed him, and Suzuki, slightly taken aback, agreed. The goblin leaned in, questioning why he had lost the energetic spirit he'd shown earlier. Beside them, the skeleton guard chuckled. Attempting to reassure him, the skeleton guard advised him not to worry about the lizard man, Garaga, explaining that the warrior simply had a few screws loose. He elaborated on the creature's nature, revealing that Garaga viewed humans as nothing more than food. He pointed out that just the other day, when hunger struck, the lizard man had devoured one of his fellow slaves. Suzuki stared, speechless, at the grim scene. The stark reality of the danger crashed down on him. He realized with a surge of fear that without his unique ability, he would be utterly helpless against such a monster. Sensing his alarm, the skeleton guard offered a small comfort, clarifying that Garaga would not be training with the silver class. The term was unfamiliar to Suzuki, who wondered internally what silver meant. The goblin took this as his cue to explain the structure of the Raibakusu unit. He outlined a hierarchy of ranks for the soldiers: bronze class at the bottom, followed by iron, adamantite, and finally silver class. Above even the silver class were Nefra and her top subordinates. Processing this, Suzuki asked what his own rank was. The goblin replied that while Garaga was an exception due to his strength, Suzuki, as a new recruit, was designated a stone golem soldier. The surrounding demons erupted in laughter at the absurdly low-sounding title, leaving Suzuki flustered. The goblin chuckled, assuring him that everyone started at the bottom and that bronze rank was attainable with hard work. A stout, single-eyed warrior added a warning: if he didn't show results soon, he'd be considered the lowest of the low. Suzuki then asked how one could advance through the ranks. The one-eyed warrior explained that while merits could be earned in various ways, the quickest path to promotion was combat. By challenging and defeating a soldier from a higher rank, a warrior could immediately take their place. The concept intrigued Suzuki. He is immediately thrown into a chaotic training exercise, dodging a flurry of attacks from several numbered soldiers. The goblin instructor's voice rings out, announcing the start of his training as he grits his teeth and weaves through the assault. As he fights, his mind races with the thought that his unique ability is only appreciated by demons. The presence of dangerous individuals like Garaga is unsettling, but his resolve hardens as he thinks of Excella. To save her, he knows he needs a different, truer kind of strength. This burning desire for power fuels his movements. He pushes himself harder, recalling the king's dismissive words calling him trash, yet also remembering the promise that with dedicated training, he could become strong. That single possibility is what drives him forward. He recognizes the familiar pattern of his circumstances, a narrative common to heroes thrust into strange new worlds. To him, this isn't just a chance. It feels like a fundamental rule of his new reality, a promise of eventual success. Clenching his fist, he feels a surge of conviction. This, he realizes, is the true beginning of his new life, the moment he starts to actively seize his own destiny. Several hours pass. In a combat arena, a match begins and ends in an instant as an armored Cyclops soldier is thrown backward, crashing to the ground in defeat. He stands over his fallen opponent, sword in hand, looking slightly dazed as the surrounding soldiers erupt in cheers, proclaiming his victory. He can hardly believe it himself, questioning if he was truly the one who won. His disbelief quickly turns to frustrated accusation. He points wildly at the defeated soldier and the cheering crowd, shouting that they must have let him win, insisting they went easy on him in every single match. His words are met only with confusion. He leans in close to the armored Cyclops, yelling that their reactions were unnatural, that they all fell forward when struck. The defeated soldier sweats nervously, stammering that it must be his imagination. His interrogation is cut short by a looming presence. A massive, white, furry beast appears behind him. As he turns, startled, a small, fluffy creature detaches from the larger one and lands softly on his head, leaving him utterly stunned. He stares up at the massive, furry creature, a question forming in his mind. What is this? Could it be his next opponent? Before he can ponder further, the skeleton guard approaches him from the side. The guard informs him that preparations are complete, addressing the giant beast as Gregorio. Suzuki looks up at the creature, noting its immense size and apparent strength. The beast, for its part, seems to recall that it arrived here some time ago, achieving the rank of blue copper without really trying. Seeing an opportunity, Suzuki asks the beast, whom he now believes is named Gregorio, if it will help him train. He leaps forward, wrapping his arms around the beast's leg in a grateful hug and shouting his thanks. As his demonic supervisors watch, the beast's leg twitches slightly beneath his grasp. Letting go, he touches the thick fur, remarking to himself how soft it feels. The creature's movements are slow and deliberate, putting him at ease. He steps back, drawing his sword with renewed confidence. He believes that with his current abilities, he can compensate for his new partner's slowness. He readies his stance, declaring the start of their match. With a determined cry, he charges forward, but the beast's leg whips around with shocking speed, catching him completely by surprise. The impact sends him flying. He crashes to the ground, dazed and unable to comprehend what just happened as the beast looms over him. The creature pins him to the earth with its massive foot. Nearby, one of the observers suggests they stop the fight, calling it pitiful. The skeleton guard calmly replies that the rules forbid them from interfering until a 30 count is complete. The concerned observer remarks that this is unusual. Someone named Garaga is usually Suzuki's opponent, and this new creature is going too far. He muses that something about the situation always feels slightly off. He lay defeated on the training grounds, the session having pushed him far past his limits. With a strained voice, he cried out for it to stop. His plea was heard by his observers. The skeleton guard approached, asking if he was all right. Suzuki, bruised and exhausted, tried to insist he was fine, but immediately corrected himself through gritted teeth, admitting that he was not okay at all. He was overwhelmed by a sense of his own inadequacy. Clenching a fist, he thought about how weak he was, resolving that he had to push himself even harder. A month passed. From a tower overlooking the grounds, Nefra contemplated Suzuki's relentless dedication to his self-imposed training. She watched him now, swinging a sword with fierce determination. A blush crept onto her face as she found his earnest efforts incredibly endearing, thinking how his daily struggles made her want to spoil him. Then, an idea struck her. It had been exactly 1 month since he joined them. She decided she should get him something to commemorate the occasion. With newfound resolve, she stood in her chambers, determined to devise the perfect gift, something that would truly please Suzuki. Meanwhile, Suzuki arrived at her door. He called out her name, asking if she had a moment for him, but his words caught in his throat as he saw what was inside. His eyes widened in disbelief. Standing beside Nefra was the captive heroine. He could only stammer out her name in shock. Excella. He stared, speechless, as Nefra explained her decision. She told him that he had a good reputation among the other soldiers, and that his work ethic was commendable. Therefore, she had decided to reward him by giving him his own slave, one she had purchased herself. He is ecstatic, thanking Nefra profusely and expressing his happiness. He thinks to himself how wonderful she is. The captive heroine, Excella, politely introduces herself, and he stammers a reply, promising to continue doing his best for Nefra. His joy, however, is cut short when his gaze falls upon Excella's feet. Noticing the bandages wrapped around her ankles, he asks her what happened. Before Excella can answer, Nefra interjects with a smile. She explains that while the previous injury was to Excella's arm, this is different. She calmly states that she cut the tendons in her feet. Her casual cruelty shatters his cheerful demeanor. Suzuki's face hardens as he grabs Excella's shoulder, turning to Nefra and shouting at her not to mess with him. He demands to know why she would do such a thing, yelling that Excella might never be able to run again. Nefra's expression twists into a matching fury as she screams back, questioning who he thinks he is to speak to her that way. The argument escalates. Nefra coldly reminds him that he is just another slave and, as her elder, she will not tolerate his insolence. She turns away from him, her profile rigid with anger. She turns back to face him, her voice laced with scorn. She declares that she gave him a mere human out of mercy and that she holds no value for him as a warrior. She challenges him directly, asking what he can possibly do on his own and how he expects to survive. Her gaze narrows with intensity. If he intends to defy her so arrogantly, she demands, then he must first show her he has the power to back it up. In response, Suzuki can only grit his teeth in silent rage. His response is not with words, but with action. He abruptly turns and sprints out of the room. As he flees, Excella calls out his name, pleading with him to leave her behind. Nefra watches him go, her expression unreadable. As he vanishes through the doorway, Nefra is left alone. Her face contorts with frustration and hurt. Biting her lip, she mutters that he is a fool and tells him to do as he pleases. She stands with her back to the captive heroine, Excella, who attempts to offer some reassurance. Excella suggests she'll be back soon, but Nefra cuts her off with a curt, dismissive command to be silent. The tension within the chamber is left to hang in the air as, outside, the day progresses under a cloudy sky. Meanwhile, Suzuki Riku has made his way to a training ground in the woods. He is met by the skeleton guard and a stout, pumpkin-helmed warrior. The skeleton asks if his business with Lady Nefra is concluded, while the other guard offers a simple welcome. He ignores the question, instead looking directly at the skeleton guard with a determined glint in his eye. He announces that it is time for them to have a squad duel, a declaration that catches the skeletal warrior by surprise. His request hangs in the air, confusing the guards. Suzuki turns away slightly, his voice firm as he insists they do it immediately. The skeleton guard, still processing the demand, questions if he is truly serious. Seeing the hero's unwavering resolve, the skeletal warrior's demeanor shifts. He concedes that if Suzuki is this insistent, then he will accept the challenge. The duel is over in an instant. Suzuki lies face down in the dirt, bruised and utterly defeated, his sword resting just out of reach. From the sidelines, the elderly demon observer chides the pumpkin-helmed warrior, telling him he went too far. The armored guard remains silent as Suzuki struggles on the ground. The skeleton guard kneels, his voice filled with a strange mix of concern and frustration. He explains that he couldn't hold back in a proper duel, as their very lives are at stake in such contests. From the ground, Suzuki weakly agrees, acknowledging the truth in the guard's words. Later, the two guards sit together, reflecting on the fight. The pumpkin-helmed warrior muses that while everyone seems to like him and treat him well, it's akin to them liking a character he has created. He concludes that when it comes to a true sword fight, the reality of his weakness is laid bare, a sentiment that seems to echo Suzuki's own recent, harsh lesson. Suzuki Riku lay defeated on the forest floor, blood trickling from his mouth. A single thought consumed him. He wanted power. He needed strength. One of his guards stood over him for a moment. The duel concluded, before turning to leave him alone in the training grounds. Despite his defeat, Suzuki soon rose and began practicing again with a wooden sword. From a distance, the goblin instructor watched, calling out to him to stop for the day. The armored Cyclops soldier beside him agreed, stating that the duel was postponed. The goblin instructor turned to his companion, wondering aloud what was wrong with the human and whether he was sulking. He admitted he couldn't understand what humans think, questioning if it was a cultural difference. The Cyclops simply agreed, suggesting they leave him, as a patrol would eventually find him if he collapsed. As they departed, the sky opened up. Rain began to pour down, but Suzuki continued to swing his wooden sword with frantic, desperate energy. The relentless swings took their toll, and the wooden sword finally shattered against a tree. He stood motionless in the downpour, the broken pieces at his feet, a figure of utter dejection. His mind replayed Nefra's challenge, her voice echoing in his memory. If he wished to stand beside her, he would first have to show her his true power. Spurred by the memory, a desperate hope surged through him. He thrust his hand forward, panting with exertion, and screamed the command for a fire spell. But nothing happened. The spell failed to ignite. He collapsed to his knees in the mud, the reality of his weakness crashing down on him. He acknowledged that it was true. No matter that he was from another world, a reincarnated being, he was nothing more than pebble. His hand closed around a small, insignificant stone from the mud. His face contorted in anguish and despair as the rain washed over him. He remains kneeling in the mud, defeated, as the giant furry beast looms over him. A voice cuts through the downpour, calling him a foolish one. Startled, he looks up, recognizing the creature. Gregorio, he asks in disbelief. The beast's voice booms, explaining that even with decades of effort, he could never hope to defeat the demon race with his current strength. Beside him, a young woman with spiky blonde hair gasps. The voice continues, revealing that the name, Gregorio, is merely a temporary designation. Her attention is drawn upward as two small, cloud-like forms descend through the rain. The clouds drift down, landing beside a pair of elegant, high-heeled shoes. Suzuki stares bewildered as a woman's voice introduces herself. My name is Ruru. She stands before them, radiating an aura of immense power, her long hair flowing. With a calm but firm voice, she makes a startling declaration, and I am human. In the pouring rain, Suzuki Riku confronts Ruru, his voice cracking with desperation. He demands to know why humans other than himself are being turned into Raijishin, crying out that there's no reason for anyone but him and his master to be changed. She calmly explains that she had used a transformation art to infiltrate the Raijishin, with the intention of observing and causing disruption from within. However, she continues, she had to change her plans because her master was simply too foolish to be of any use. The insult strikes him deeply. His face twists in anguish as he reflects on the labels he's always carried. Trash, a fool. He knows his own weakness better than anyone. A flood of memories rushes through his mind, a montage of past failures and struggles, reinforcing the painful truth he has always understood. Ruru abruptly breaks his spiraling thoughts by sharply poking his cheek. She tells him that his weakness is precisely why he must make an effort. She continues prodding him, insisting that he must train his body every single day, just as he practices with his wooden sword. With another poke, she declares that if he does so, he will one day be able to use magic worthy of a true hero. He finally snaps, roaring at her to listen to him. Unimpressed, Ruru retorts that the more foolish a person is, the more stubborn they are, once again calling him a fool. Her expression suddenly turns serious. She addresses him by name, Suzuki, and commands him to listen closely. She raises a finger to her lips, her expression intense amidst the downpour. Her master, she states, is merely foolish, not entirely without potential. She continues, questioning why she would risk using a spell on someone so seemingly incompetent. It is because, she declares, she is betting on his latent potential. Stunned, he can only stammer, questioning what ability she could possibly be referring to. Ignoring his question for the moment, she instructs him to follow her to her home, where she promises to explain everything. With that, she turns to lead the way, leaving him to stare after her in the rain. The path leads them to a secluded wooden hut deep within the forest. He expresses his surprise at finding a dwelling in such a remote location, and she explains that no one ever ventures this far, where the dense canopy of trees creates a false sky. Once inside, she tells him to remove his wet clothes before he catches a cold. The blunt instruction leaves him blushing and flustered. He hesitantly agrees, then points out that she should change as well. A small, knowing smile plays on her lips as she listens. Leaning over him as he sits on the floor, she playfully asks if he is feeling shy, calling him an innocent slave. He averts his gaze, completely flustered by her proximity. Her teasing demeanor vanishes. She explains that he witnesses something incredible every day without even realizing it, a fact she finds pathetic for a summoned hero. As she speaks, an image of a stern, dark-haired woman with an ornate headdress flashes through his mind. He recoils, frightened and confused by the vision and her words. She grabs the hood of his garment, pulling him close. She tells him bluntly that he is not a hero, but rather useless trash, devoid of power. She reminds him that she has said this repeatedly, yet his ability is still something to be envied. He asks if this means he simply hasn't been able to make use of his power. She acknowledges his point and then poses a condition. If he were to grasp the true nature of this power, then her thought hangs unfinished in the air. She looks down at Suzuki Riku, calmly informing him that he is destined to save the world simply by being cute. He stares back, utterly bewildered by her claim. She, however, declares it with unwavering conviction, stating that she believes it to be true. She then dramatically presents a scroll, announcing it as the 48 cute gestures, a technique she calls prettiness. He can only stare, sweat beading on his face as he struggles to process the words. His confusion erupts into outrage. He leaps up, shouting and accusing her of mocking him. Ruru remains unfazed, thinking to herself that she is being completely serious. He presses on, demanding to know if she truly believes he could become strong by learning this prettiness. She retorts that he is a fool, clarifying that she never said he would become strong. She posits that while physical strength and magical power are necessary conditions to save the world, Suzuki Riku seems to agree, shouting back that this is obvious. She continues, questioning if the battles that have given the demon tribe so much trouble up to this point were truly won through military might alone. Inside the hut, she reveals a critical fact. Her specialty is transformation arts. Yet despite this, she fought on equal terms with the Demon King for several years. The revelation stuns him. He stammers, trying to comprehend that she fought the Demon King. As he looks at her determined face, he begins to wonder who this woman truly is. She explains to Suzuki that the power he desires is the very thing that can rob Selfiano's Demon King forces of their sanity. Stunned, he asks if she knows about the fighting arena. She confirms that since being summoned, she has been investigating and has learned a few things. She notes that his abilities are more effective against the demon tribe, but their power is halved when used on those with a similar attribute. He considers her words, realizing that what she says is likely true. His thoughts drift to his past encounters, the lizard man Garaga, the fierce Orneo, and the skeletal guard. Ruru continues, explaining that the techniques she created were designed to counter high-ranking demons like Nefra. She reveals the name of this art, prettiness. Her gaze intensifies as she promises that if he masters all 48 techniques, his own cuteness will multiply by 10, or even several tens of times. He recoils, aghast at the thought. He shouts that the idea of his cuteness increasing tenfold is utterly absurd. He gestures wildly, insisting he should just learn prettiness to save the world and questioning the logic of it all. Ruru, however, ignores his frantic questions and turns away. She changes the subject, turning to him with a serious expression. She asks what his dream is, what he truly wants to accomplish in this world. He falls silent, looking down in thought. His thoughts turn inward, settling on a simple desire, to at least be able to save the people around him. He thinks of Excella, hoping to prevent her from suffering a terrible fate. He finally found his voice, shouting with newfound resolve. He declared that even if he was incompetent, a mere pebble or worthless trash, he would one day create a world where no one had to live in oppression. That was his purpose. His passionate cry hung in the air as Ruru watched him, her expression neutral. He trailed off, his determination clear. In response, Ruru began to undo her elaborate hair buns. She informed Suzuki that time was short and she needed to teach him her prettiness techniques immediately. With that, she declared that she would be staying with him for the foreseeable future, a statement that left him utterly stunned. He stammered, clutching a towel to his chest as a blush spread across his face, completely flustered by her sudden announcement. A knowing smile touched her lips as she looked at him. She confessed that her dream was the same as his, the master's. He looked at her, a new understanding forming. For now, he decided he would simply have to trust this person. Turning to her, he suggested that they should rest for the day. A week has passed since the great battle between Nefra and Suzuki. Inside a now disheveled room, Mel remarks that it has been a week since Suzuki left. Kill agrees, adding that both the person and the room are a complete mess. Her curiosity piqued, Mel peeks out the door, gesturing for silence. She overhears someone summoning Excella, who promptly agrees. Wondering what is happening, Mel decides to follow. Bursting through another doorway with a radiant smile, Excella joyfully announces her return, calling out for the hero. Her cheerful call is met by Nefra, who demands to know what is happening. Excella explains that Suzuki is about to participate in a platoon duel in the underground fighting arena, gesturing towards a large, rowdy crowd of demons. Upon hearing the news, Kill and Mel eagerly decide to go watch from the front row. Nefra, however, is filled with concern, believing Suzuki can't possibly win and worrying that he'll be badly injured. Her thoughts are cut short as she spots him arriving. From their seats, overlooking the vast arena, they see him. Suzuki stands calmly in the center of the fighting floor as Kill excitedly points him out to the others. She stares intently, a strange conflict brewing within her. Part of her analytically notes that something about him seems different, while another, more flustered part of her mind screams about how handsome and cool he looks. Her composure shatters completely as he walks forward with a gentle expression. She is overwhelmed, thinking to herself that he has somehow become even cuter than before. She tries to rationalize her reaction, telling herself she's just confused from not seeing him for a while. But a memory of Excella telling Suzuki he was cuter than she first thought makes Nefra realize that isn't the problem. She is left questioning the true reason for her intense feelings. Her attention snaps to the arena floor, where Suzuki's opponent stands ready. It is a skeleton guard, a second-class iron soldier, who wonders aloud why he's been pitted against such a foe. The sight throws her into a panic. She demands to know how this could have happened, and a distressed Excella explains that it was Suzuki himself who volunteered for the match. Excella continues, revealing a grim truth about the undead warriors. They were once human, she explains, and the one Suzuki now faces was a swordsman named Gilfried, killed by a skilled warrior and reanimated by magic. The skeleton itself has no self-awareness, a fact to which the creature seems to agree with a gesture. This revelation deepens Nefra's despair. She clutches her head, convinced that Suzuki's combat power is insufficient for such an impossible fight. She laments his return, wishing he had stayed away. Down in the arena, however, Suzuki appears completely unfazed. He tells the skeleton guard that he understands the situation and that it's fine. The undead warrior responds that, as this is a platoon duel, he cannot hold back. Suzuki extends his hand, proposing they both fight with all their strength. The skeleton guard reaches out to accept the pact. As their hands are about to meet, a soft sigh escapes Suzuki's lips. Their hands clasp firmly. In that moment, an ethereal aura envelopes them as spectral flowers bloom in the air, marking the strange and solemn agreement between the living boy and the undead warrior. The moment is broken by a sharp voice from above. A young announcer points to the arena, declaring that the match will now begin. Beside a tense Nefra, Kill asks what's wrong, mentioning that she thought she saw something just now. A Wolfman referee raises his hand, officially commencing the platoon duel between Suzuki and Gilfried. The two combatants stand ready on the stage as Nefra watches from the stands, her hands clasped in worry. She watched intently as Kill and Mel looked on in confusion, wondering why nothing was happening. But Nefra knew better. The battle, she realized, had already begun with that handshake. Her eyes narrowed in thought. From the moment of their touch, Gilfried's aura had clearly diminished. It seemed as though Suzuki had done something, but she couldn't discern what. Her mind flashed back to that brief contact, replaying the moment their hands clasped. What exactly had he done? In the arena, the skeleton guard stood poised, sword at the ready. He broke the silence, questioning Suzuki's inaction. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Aren't you going to attack?" A memory surfaced of a woman with long, light hair tied in buns. She had introduced herself and her methods, the 48 killing techniques of prettiness. She explained to a bewildered Suzuki that to fool the enemy, one must first fool their allies, and that everyone loves a pretty face. She then struck a dramatic pose, declaring her own name. The training had been grueling and strange. Prettiness had forced him into her own clothes, berated him for being clumsy, and meticulously styled his hair and face. It was a period of intense, hidden preparation that his companions knew nothing about. The result of this training was now on full display. Suzuki's features had softened, his appearance transformed into something almost delicate. This was the first of Prettiness's precepts, appearance. He steeled himself, thinking that if he could just fight her properly. The sudden transformation sent a shockwave through the arena. Both Nefra and the skeleton guard stared, their faces masks of pure, unadulterated shock. From her seat, Nefra was utterly flustered. "What is this? He's so cute all of a sudden," she sputtered, feeling a wave of exhaustion. She thought that if things weren't so chaotic, she would have to discipline him for this stunt. After all, he was about to face Gilfried, a second-class iron soldier. The undead warrior was completely bewildered. He stammered to himself, admitting he had no idea what was going on. All he knew for certain was that this was a very, very bad situation. He declared that rank is second only to life itself, and that he would now attack with his full power. Announcing his secret technique, bone armor transformation. His skeletal form crackled with energy as his very bones began to shift and sharpen. From the sidelines, Kill cried out in alarm, pointing out that his left arm had become a weapon and questioning if it was a violation of the rules. Nefra, however, remained composed, explaining that it was not against the rules as it was part of the man's innate ability. She added a crucial detail. The tip of the bone blade had been intentionally blunted so as not to be lethal. He roared, lunging forward to unleash his next technique, the bone-piercing rush. As he charged, Mel and Kill watched with wide eyes, Mel shouting for Suzuki to dodge the incoming assault. The attack was a blur of motion, with arcs of energy filling the space between the two combatants as the skeletal warrior drove his bone blade forward in a flurry of strikes. The ground erupted where the final blow landed. Mel watched in horror, exclaiming at the incredible speed and fearing that Suzuki had been caught in the blast. His lunge carried him across the arena floor, leaving a trail of dust and debris in his wake. He looked up from his crouched position, a bead of sweat forming on his skull as he stared in disbelief. The attack had been amazing, he thought, but something was wrong. The reason for his shock became clear. Suzuki stood beside him, completely unharmed, gently patting his helmeted head with a cheerful smile. The young hero admitted that he hadn't been able to see the attack at all. This was the effect of Puritisu's 20th technique, Defenseless. Watching from their vantage point, Princess Excella gasped, remarking on how incredible it was that Suzuki hadn't been hit. Nefra, however, looked utterly stunned, her expression grim as she corrected the princess, stating that was not what had happened. She clarified the unbelievable truth, her voice strained. It wasn't that Gilfried's attacks had missed their mark. The reality was far stranger. He had been unable to land a blow because Suzuki was simply too cute to attack. The revelation left Excella speechless. She stared in disbelief as Excella expressed her distress. The princess lamented that she felt as if she were about to die from the overwhelming cuteness. She questioned what would happen if someone were to strike Suzuki in such a defenseless state, finding the very thought too tragic to bear. On the arena floor, the situation resolved itself. Gilfried, kneeling with his sword cast aside, conceded the match. The Wolfman referee confirmed that Gilfried was completely unable to attack, making Suzuki's state the perfect defense. He then officially declared Gilfried's surrender. With the match concluded, the announcer's voice boomed, declaring the winner, Suzuki. He looked up into the stands, a bright, triumphant expression on his face. His victory was met with a wave of confused excitement from the crowd. Mel and Kill cheered enthusiastically, admitting they didn't quite grasp how he won, but were thrilled nonetheless. The elderly demon observer remarked that he had initially thought Suzuki had disappeared, only for him to reappear in such a formidable state. The armored Cyclops soldier beside him simply agreed, acknowledging Suzuki's impressive performance. As he stood there, Excella suddenly rushed towards him from behind, wrapping him in a powerful, unexpected embrace. He let out a startled cry, caught completely off guard by the princess's actions. She began carrying him away from the center of the arena, apologizing for her suddenness. Still held in her arms, he looked back at her, confused, and asked for her name. His question was cut short as he suddenly cried out in agony, his face contorted in pain. Excella, still holding him, winced as well. The sudden outburst of pain drew shocked and bewildered looks from everyone watching. Excella, the Catgirl sisters, the Cyclops soldier, and even the defeated Gilfried. Flustered, she released him and tried to explain, apologizing and mentioning something about having a Mel switch. She insisted that she wasn't a bad person, all while Mel and Kill watched from the stands with expressions of clear annoyance. He managed a strained smile, explaining that it was a bit too much for him at the moment. Lifting his hoodie, he revealed a large, dark handprint bruised on his abdomen. The pain was too intense, he admitted. Excella stared, horrified, as she recognized the shape of the injury she had just inflicted. He flinches as Excella, ignoring her own strength, erupts in a furious shout, demanding blood. Panicked by her intensity, Suzuki waves his hands dismissively, trying to calm her down and insisting that there are more important things to focus on. His attempt is cut short as Nefra intervenes, effortlessly lifting the struggling princess into the air. While Excella demands to know who dares restrain her, Suzuki looks up, the reality of the situation finally sinking in as he murmurs that he won. Nefra calmly confirms his splendid victory. After the commotion subsides, he turns to face the entire arena of demonic spectators. With Nefra, Kill, and Mel watching from behind, Suzuki offers a deep, formal bow, sincerely apologizing for the disturbance he and Excella caused. He then addresses Nefra directly, starting to apologize for being a mere familiar. She cuts him off, stating that the class promotion battle is next, and that he is to return to her side when it's over. Despite her commanding tone, a deep blush spreads across her face. She turns away, unable to meet his gaze, and quietly mutters the word idiot. He, however, seems completely oblivious to her reaction. A bright, confident smile spreads across his face as he readily agrees, promising to return without fail before the sun sets. As Suzuki Riku prepares to depart, he cheerfully informs a silent and displeased Nefra that he will return by sunset. A young woman in a maid's uniform gently ushers him along. Her eyes narrow as she watches them go, thinking to herself that he had better come back. She then quietly apologizes under her breath. Meanwhile, Riku and his new companion walk through a dense forest. The maid asks where they are headed, and he enthusiastically explains that there is someone he wanted to meet, Excella. The maid reacts with surprise, questioning who that is. He continues, proudly stating that this person is his wise master, the one who taught him how to maximize his abilities. He walks with a bounce in his step, eager for the introduction. Their path opens into a clearing, but where a dwelling should be, there's only a pile of splintered lumber and a lone tree stump. The sudden, stark silence of the scene is jarring. Upon seeing the wreckage, Riku cries out in shock that the hut is gone. His companion looks on with concern as he spots a letter pinned to the stump with a knife. He picks it up and begins to read the scroll, which is addressed to him. The letter explains that the writer, having realized Selfiano was aware of their presence, decided to flee the country before being pursued. The message concludes this section with a simple, final farewell. It continues, acknowledging that while parting is painful, it is something the writer is accustomed to. They add a self-deprecating note about not being a very charming person before offering one last thought. The final words of the letter are revealed alongside an image of Ruru, looking back with a gentle smile. Even if we are apart, we are under the same sky. Our feelings are the same. Back in the clearing, Riku stands in stunned silence, wondering why this has happened when he still had so much to say. As he processes his grief, a small, circular mark on the back of his hand begins to pulse with a faint light. He runs through the wilderness, shouting his master's name in anguish. His new companion, the blonde maid, looks on with concern, asking what he meant when he mentioned a master earlier. He whirls around, a desperate hope in his eyes, asking if she might be the one with the pink hair. The maid's expression turns serious as she confirms this, asking in turn if he knows of Master Ruru. She elaborates with conviction, identifying the hero's master as the greatest mind in all of humanity, the former Grand Marshal of the Empire, Ruru Dimension. She asserts there is no mistake. The revelation stuns him. He repeats the titles in disbelief, recalling that he'd heard the Grand Marshal was killed late in the Great War. As relief washes over him, tears of joy stream down the maid's face. She explains that even when Ruru was forced to serve Selfiano in the Demon Lord's army, she remained a beacon of hope for them all. He processes the weight of this new information, murmuring his master's name. Turning away, he decides they should go home. The maid seems taken aback, reminding him that while they may be separated now, they will always be together in spirit. He rejects this sentiment, turning back to her with newfound determination. He calls out her name, Excella, and declares that he will not give up until he can meet his master again with a smile. Moved by his resolve, Excella agrees wholeheartedly. 2 hours later, they find themselves in a city where Lord Selfiano is leading a procession, flanked by Nefra, Kill, and Mel. Selfiano reveals that her second eye has detected a human running loose in demon territory, Suzuki Riku, who watches from the crowd. She continues her procession, reflecting internally that her target was already gone by the time she arrived. Admitting she is not yet fully recovered, her expression hardens. She will not be outwitted by a human, and she suspects the intruder is. Her train of thought is broken when Nefra approaches, presenting the captured Suzuki Riku. Nefra reports with certainty that he is connected to Ruru Dimension, the former Grand Marshal, adding that the one who was with Ruru is said to have died in battle. The news visibly surprises Lord Selfiano. She considers the implications. With the defeat of the humans in the last war all but certain, a plan forms in her mind. She realizes Ruru might be feigning death to gain an advantage for the next conflict. She concludes this is precisely the kind of strategy that woman would employ. Suzuki Riku stood in stunned silence, the reality of his situation crashing down on him. He thought of the incredible power of both his master, Ruru, and his captor, Selfiano, realizing with awe that his master had anticipated this very confrontation and had been making preparations. He understood now that both women were commanders of entire armies, wielding a level of influence and strength that far exceeded anything he could have imagined. As he stood in the grand hall with Selfiano and her retinue, Kill's eyes suddenly widened in recognition. She gasped, exclaiming that she had just remembered something about the human. She turned to him with a beaming smile and a thumbs up, cheerfully congratulating the one she called Suzuki for becoming one of the 5 special slaves. The unexpected announcement, delivered with such glee, left Riku utterly flabbergasted. Her sister, Mel, immediately tried to shush her, hissing that it was supposed to be a promise and not something to be spoken aloud. Nearby, Lord Selfiano simply closed her eyes and sighed, clearly exasperated by the lack of discretion. She addressed Nefra, stating coolly that rules are only meaningful if they are strictly followed. Nefra laughed, admitting that she had tried to convey the information properly, but must have made a mistake somewhere along the way. She then mockingly asked if her subordinate was incompetent, a jab that visibly annoyed Riku. Her playful tone vanished as she leaned in close to Riku, pointing a finger at him and shouting that he was one of 3 slaves, not 5. The sudden correction and aggressive tone left him stunned. Before he could process this, Lord Selfiano's hand shot out and grabbed his face, forcing some kind of food into his mouth. The shock of the act rendered him momentarily speechless, and he began to chew blankly. He finally managed to demand an explanation for her bizarre behavior, but Selfiano was lost in a state of intense pleasure her body trembling as she savored whatever she had just tasted. Composing herself, Selfiano wiped her mouth and declared that if it was Suzuki, then it was perfectly fine. She mused that his earlier reaction had been cute and wondered what the fuss was about. Seeing this sudden shift, Riku began to think that perhaps this strange reaction was a weakness he could exploit. He gets swept up in the moment, cheekily asking Lord Selfiano if this means he'll be granted a large territory of his own. Nefra, aghast at his audacity, shouts his name in disbelief. Selfiano, however, remains composed. She coolly tells him not to get carried away, stating that such a thing is absolutely out of the question, though she gives a dispassionate okay, as if to dismiss the topic entirely. He presses his luck, a hopeful glint in his eye, wondering aloud if he might even be set free. This proves too much for Nefra, who grabs him and yells at him to get a grip. The exchange is cut short by a violent eruption of power. Nefra screams Selfiano's name as the elven lord is suddenly blasted backward, shattering a nearby window and flying out into the open air. He watches in shock, realizing that Selfiano's reason and instinct are at war within her, running rampant. He knows he must stop this somehow. From a balcony below, Kill and Mel observe the aftermath, noting that while dramatic, the fall doesn't appear to have been fatal. The next day, things have calmed considerably. Nefra leads Riku through a bustling town square, explaining that they have left the castle and crossed the bridge. Riku, wide-eyed, takes in the sights of the new, lively environment. She then stops and points towards a nearby building, announcing to the surprised young man that they have arrived. This, she declares, is Suzuki's house. He stands in awe before a large, two-story white house nestled amongst trees and bushes. He can hardly believe its size, shouting in amazement that this is truly his home. Nefra waits for him on the porch. He turns to her, beaming with pure joy and excitement. Seeing his delight, Nefra gives a confident smile and invites him to see the inside. He steps inside and is immediately impressed, exclaiming how wonderful it is. The interior is well appointed, with comfortable furniture, a grand staircase, and an ornate tea set on a table. He dives face first onto the large bed, his voice muffled by the pillows as he exclaims how wonderfully soft it is. As he settles in, Nefra leans over him with a sharp, knowing smile. She offers a pleasant tidbit about the mansion. This very bed is where they murdered its previous owner. The words strike him with sudden terror. He recoils, demanding to know why she looks so pleased with herself. The thought of his family's suffering while he lives in such comfort is too much, and he decides he will sleep in an empty room at the castle as always. Nefra calmly agrees, thinking to herself that everything is proceeding according to her plan. She leads him from the bedroom to another part of the house. A large, muscular man with a single horn opens a door for them, and Nefra announces that she has brought the slave, Suzuki. The door opens to reveal a group of people waiting inside. A young blonde man, a woman holding a baby, a smiling maid, and an older bald man, all standing near the horned attendant. The maid steps forward to introduce herself as Excella and the older man as Orneo. The young blonde man then speaks up, introducing himself as Alan, his wife as Kate, and their infant daughter as Quirce. With the introductions complete, Nefra turns to Riku. She informs him that, as a result of their earlier discussion, he is now a slave in name only. He is to listen to his master and begin his duties today, warning that any disobedience will be met with appropriate measures. She observes him with the others and notes with a smile that he seems to be getting along with them, so there should be no problems. Announcing that she must return to her work, she turns to leave, leaving Riku looking slightly confused. The moment she is gone, his entire demeanor changes. He waves a cheerful goodbye, then turns to the stunned group and boasts that he was just putting on a tough act for Nefra. Excella and the others are shocked by his sudden shift. He then addresses the family directly, admitting he knows little about babies, but will do what he can to help. He gives them a serious instruction. If they are ever taken to the demon town, they are to tell people his name. In the hallway behind them, the skeletal guard Gilfried stands watch. He listens as the blonde woman, Excella, begins to speak, mentioning that Selfiano had visited the previous day. As she speaks, the others, Alan and Orneo, bow their heads in gratitude towards him. The old man, Orneo, advises that it would be wise to keep the size of his territory in check. Excella agrees, adding that if he gets too carried away, he might lose his sanity. He looks at her, a bead of sweat forming on his temple as she continues her warning. Even if Selfiano agreed to the arrangement, she explains, it's highly unlikely that the other demons would simply remain silent. His mind races with the implications, and he wonders aloud if he should raise his rank to expand his territory. Orneo quickly counters that, in the short term, a higher rank means more battles and greater risk. Excella suggests they proceed with caution. He agrees, acknowledging that while becoming stronger will allow him to help them, it will be a long road given his current weakness. The conversation is interrupted by Kate, who holds her infant daughter and asks if he is the one who will save the world. Her direct question stuns him into silence. With tears welling in her eyes, Kate explains that when the kingdom of Rylane was conquered, they believed their world had ended, but she feels that God did not abandon them. She clutches her child, crying openly now. She doesn't care if it takes many years, she says, so long as one day her child can live in a happy world. He watches her, his expression filled with empathy. A silent promise hangs in the air, a shared hope for a better future. Though the separation from Master Ruru was painful, a new resolve takes root. Turning back to the group, he addresses them all. He admits that he was once adrift, but his potential was discovered. With renewed conviction, he declares that he will be the one to save this world. But this hopeful moment is a fragile thing. Elsewhere, a room lies in ruins, a stark reminder of the brutal nature of this world. A truth easily forgotten in a quiet room filled with hope. Suzuki Riku walks home, a bag of groceries in his arms and a cheerful smile on his face. He reflects on the extra food he bought, a reward for his hard work, and anticipates how pleased Excella and the others will be. He feels his relationship with Alan's family has been going well. Approaching the door, he calls out, "I'm home." He opens the door and stops dead, his expression shifting to one of shock. The groceries tumble from his grasp. Inside, a vase lies shattered on the floor amidst a puddle of water. He stares at the scene, his mind struggling to comprehend what has happened. His horror intensifies as he sees Alan lying on the floor, bleeding profusely from a head wound. With his last breaths, Alan reaches a trembling hand toward him, pleading for him to get his wife and daughter outside to safety. Suzuki's face contorts in terror and rage. Realization dawns, and he screams out Excella's name as he spins around and bolts from the house. He bursts into the yard to a scene of carnage. The hulking lizard man, Garaga, looms over Kate, who has collapsed on the ground in fear. Garaga smirks cruelly at the terrified women. He remarks that while he had intended to start with them, he simply couldn't restrain his appetite. As Kate and Excella scream for the hero to save them, Garaga ignores their pleas. He lifts the infant, Quirce, and places her head between his massive, sharp-toothed jaws. Excella stares, her mind refusing to accept the absolute horror unfolding before her very eyes. In the face of this atrocity, Suzuki Riku's feet begin to move, not with the urgency of a hero, but with the light, carefree bounce of a skip. His mind has completely fractured. He now skips through a whimsical, cartoon world of his own making, under a smiling sun and happy clouds, blissfully unaware of the nightmare he has left behind. As the hero stood unresponsive, Excella stared in disbelief. She couldn't believe he had lost his mind at such a crucial moment. Stealing her resolve, she decided that if it came to it, she would take the lizard man down with her. Garaga scoffed at her defiance, dismissing her as a mere hindrance and refusing to indulge her. But as she prepared for the worst, a change came over Suzuki Riku. He began to murmur, mentioning something about Puritisu's 48th technique and the third of the 30. Light step. He moved in a blur, snatching the infant Quirce from harm's way. With a defiant glare at a startled Garaga, he declared that he would not surrender the child. Excella watched in disbelief, recognizing the tactic. She recalled how he had once used his disarming cuteness to lower an opponent's guard, effortlessly taking what he wanted without a fight. The memory brought a deep blush to her cheeks. She offered a flustered apology to the hero, confessing internally that she had honestly been about to be charmed by him. His demeanor shifted back to cold fury. He demanded to know why Garaga had attacked Alan and the others, shouting at the lizard man for seeking them out in such an isolated place. Garaga simply sneered, casually remarking that he was feeling peckish. Suddenly, Nefra's voice cut through the tension. She appeared from the trees, calling out to Garaga and sternly reminding him that fighting amongst squad members was a violation of the rules. She issued a final warning. Any further unsanctioned violence would be grounds for his disposal. His amusement ruined, Garaga scoffed. He cryptically promised to return when the captain was away on business, telling his intended target to wait. He then turned his gaze back to Suzuki, who stood firm, still cradling Quirce. Unfazed, Suzuki declared their conflict an official squad duel. His eyes narrowed with icy resolve. He stated that if Garaga truly felt that way, then he would be the one to end this matter in a formal duel. He calmly stated his condition for the duel. If he won, Garaga would have to swear never to attack humans again. The lizard man warrior scoffed at the demand, intrigued by the boy's audacity. In a flash, Garaga's arm whipped out, striking him across the face. He winced, a sharp pain shooting through his cheek, but his grip on the infant Quirce remained firm. The blow enraged Nefra, who shouted Garaga's name in reprimand. Unfazed, the lizard man formally accepted the challenge, declaring it a personal dispute between himself and the hero. Suzuki remained silent, his expression unreadable. She then turned her attention to Suzuki, voicing her strong opposition to the duel. She warned him that if he was killed after feigning an intent to fight, his death would not be considered crime. He acknowledged her warning with a simple thank you, but affirmed he had no intention of backing down. He then asked her a question: why was Garaga so fixated on humans? Nefra confessed she didn't know the full story, only that it was related to something that happened 30 years prior. The memory of that time was marked by a solitary gravestone in a quiet forest clearing, adorned with flowers. Back in the present, Kate cried out his name in distress. Excella, supported by Alan, looked on with fear and asked if he truly intended to fight the lizard man. From behind, old man Orneo added his voice to the opposition, agreeing with Nefra. He explained that Garaga's techniques wouldn't be fully effective on an opponent he had already wounded, but despite this, he believed Suzuki had to go through with the fight for the sake of his convictions. The weight of his promise to Alan became clear. He had been entrusted with the lives of Alan's wife, Kate, and their daughter, Quirce. Alan's desperate plea echoed in his mind. a vow that their legacy would not be in vain. With renewed determination burning in his eyes, he clenched his fist and shouted his resolve. He would win, turning Garaga's own madness into a tool for his victory. He stood beside Old Man Orneo and Excella, a thoughtful expression on his face. Something felt unresolved, not yet settled. Elsewhere, Garaga hid himself in an alleyway, panting heavily. He stared at his hand, frustrated that its violent trembling would not cease. The small wound felt catastrophic, like shattering a piece of treasure pottery that had been carefully maintained for decades. Suzuki recognized this display as the lizardman's true power, a force that others couldn't contend with. Garaga, licking his lips, confirmed this, sneering that unlike the others, he was different. He cackled with pure ecstasy, savoring the lingering taste of Suzuki's blood. It was delicious, he thought, a supreme flavor, just as he had imagined. The flavor reminded him of something from 30 years prior. It was the same as the meat he had tasted back then, a memory that brought forth the image of a small child as he recalled the salty taste filling his mouth. He recalled how, for a time, the act of eating humans had alleviated his suffering. But the relief was always fleeting. He remembered how young girls were particularly delicious, yet once he finished his meal, the agony would immediately return. Suzuki's blood, however, was different, a sweetness that lingered for a few precious moments. This fixation fueled a manic belief. If he could just devour Suzuki's flesh, he would finally be freed, reborn as a superior being of his tribe. And so, the day of the match arrived. Suzuki and Garaga stood facing each other on a vast arena platform as a massive, roaring crowd of demons gathered below, eager for the spectacle. He stands ready as the Wolfman referee, with an exasperated expression, complains that it's impossible to watch Suzuki get beaten up from this close. Despite his reservations, he officially announces the commencement of the duel between Garaga and Suzuki. The referee then orders both combatants to step forward. Suzuki and Garaga face each other, poised for the battle to begin. As they face off, Garaga taunts his opponent, asking if he managed to say his goodbyes to Nefra. The lizard man then snarls, declaring that this day will be Suzuki's last. Suzuki remains silent, his expression hardening with resolve. With the final words exchanged, the referee raises his hand, his voice echoing through the arena. Ready? With a swift, downward motion, he bellows the command to begin. Fight. In a memory, a small girl with short, light hair introduces herself with a bright smile. She asks if the person before her is Garaga, then cheerfully says her name is Mimi and that it's a pleasure to meet him. A gruff voice simply tells her to shut up. The recollections continue. On a warm spring day, she wishes Garaga a good morning and offers him flowers, only to be told to shut up before she gets eaten. On another day, amidst falling snow, she greets him in the afternoon, remarking on the cold but beautiful weather. The response is the same. Shut up, you don't know anything. The memory shifts to Garaga's perspective. He sits alone by a roaring fire, recalling the new clothes he received 5 days prior. He thinks back to that time, remembering how delicious the food tasted. His recollection darkens as he remembers a moment of intense agony, clutching at his jaw as if it were being shattered. His face contorts in pain, then settles into a grimace of hardened resolve. The painful memory concludes with him collapsed on the ground, drool spilling from his mouth as another lizard man stands over him. He recalls that ever since that day, his mouth has been perpetually filled with the taste of salt. The flashbacks end, snapping back to the present arena. Suzuki Riku thrusts his arm forward, officially announcing the start of the squad member duel between himself and Garaga. He shouts for the fight to begin. As his voice echoes, the crowd of demonic spectators erupts into a massive cheer. Watching from the stands, Orneo remarks on the incredible roar of the audience, while Selfiano beside her quietly wonders if Suzuki will be alright. Elsewhere in the stands, Nefra's expression is severe. She orders Kill and Mel to watch both combatants closely. She warns them that Garaga could feign an accident to inflict a fatal wound at any time, and they must not look away for even a second. Her warning hangs in the air as, down in the arena, Garaga addresses Suzuki as a brat, asking if he's being underestimated. Suzuki stares back, his gaze firm, and declares that combat isn't all about power. He promises to teach Garaga that lesson right now. He makes good on his word instantly, lunging forward with incredible speed. His hand becomes a blur as he delivers a sharp, open palm strike directly to the side of Garaga's jaw. His fist connects, and he holds his ground, his gaze locked forward. The surrounding demons cry out in shock, one questioning if Garaga is truly fighting, another exclaiming that Suzuki has managed to injure him. In response to the uproar, Garaga casually wipes his snout, remarking that he couldn't even be bothered to dodge such an attack. He dismisses the crowd's noise as annoying, noting that this opponent is different from the others who have only relied on brute force. He looks at Suzuki with mild surprise. The young man, a fresh cut visible on his cheek, simply states that he believes in his master. A silent acknowledgement passes between them. They clasp hands, the grip firm, a show of mutual respect before the true battle begins. But the handshake triggers a memory in Garaga, his expression twisting into a snarl. He recalls a past encounter, questioning why someone would do something so kind for him. He remembers vowing to tear off their arm, seeing the gesture as a perfect opportunity. The memory sharpens, revealing the small girl, Mimi, gently holding his massive, clawed hand. He looks down at her, bewildered by the simple, unafraid touch. He narrows his eye, silently questioning what this feeling is. Looking up at him, Mimi simply smiles, her expression bright and innocent as she asks who he is. Snapping back to the present, the memory fuels a sudden rage in Garaga. He roars, accusing Suzuki of toying with him and calling him a crafty user. Suzuki watches, perplexed by the abrupt change in his opponent's demeanor. He then launches himself into the air, twisting his powerful body and tail into a devastating spinning attack. He bellows the name of the technique, Serpent Cross Fong Slash. Suzuki recognizes the move, identifying it as Chapter 25, Dragon Face. He puffed out his cheeks, his expression shifting from serious combatant to that of a pouting child, completely altering the atmosphere of the duel. This unexpected display sent a wave of confusion through the audience. Spectators wondered aloud what this cute being was, with some finding it too adorable to even look at. Garaga himself recoiled, shouting in disbelief and calling the sight ridiculous. The lizard man warrior was thoroughly shaken, his mind racing. He couldn't comprehend what was happening, questioning why he was suddenly so rattled. His confusion was interrupted by a vision. The young girl, Mimi, stood before him, telling him to stop. He wondered how it was possible for the Mimi from 30 years ago to be here now. His attacking hand, poised to strike, hesitated. The vision vanished, but its effect lingered. To break the spell, Garaga let out a roar and, to the horror of the crowd, tore off his own left arm. He declared he would give the limb to his opponent, the searing pain a desperate attempt to block the illusion. He looked over at Garaga with wide, concerned eyes, asking if he was all right and noting that it looked painful. The warrior, sweating from the ordeal, confirmed that he was fine and that the technique's effect was now gone. The warrior, however, was not finished. Gripping the stump of his arm, he declared that since his opponent was just a small fry, he would kill him quickly. But his advance was halted once more. The image of Mimi appeared again, standing solidly in the arena between the two fighters. She stated plainly that bullying was wrong. Both Suzuki and Garaga stared, frozen in place. He looked on, tears welling in his eyes, and identified the technique as the 13th artifice, parting. Garaga, sweating and bewildered, demanded to know what kind of illusion this was, shocked that Mimi and Suzuki had been separated into two distinct beings. The small girl then walked calmly toward the hulking, one-armed lizard man. She looked up at him and asked, "Hey, Garaga, do you have any medicine?" The lizard man warrior, Garaga, hurdles past Suzuki Riku, his momentum shattering the stone floor. Suzuki watches, wide-eyed, as the massive creature charges onward. His charge, however, comes to an abrupt halt. He now lies on the ground, looking up at the small girl Mimi. She addresses him by name, her voice filled with concern as she notes that he is bleeding. He reacts with pure rage, roaring and clawing at the air as if to tear the vision apart. He curses, demanding that the phantom before him disappear. His fury does not deter the girl. She runs forward and wraps her small arms around his massive frame, pleading with him not to be so angry. A strange, guttural laugh escapes Garaga's throat, his face a mask of conflict. Watching from a distance, Suzuki Riku realizes he has finally established a connection. He understands, however, that it is all a complete sham. Garaga, meanwhile, shoves the illusion of Mimi away. He bellows that Mimi is dead, and that this vision is just an excuse for him to keep living, a lie born from the resentment and anger of being deceived. He lunges forward again, his clawed hand gripping the top of her head. He threatens to devour her, to swallow her whole right then and there, commanding the illusion to vanish. But under his threatening grip, the girl's expression is not one of fear. She closes her eyes and smiles, a look of pure, untroubled happiness on her face. The sight seems to shatter the warrior's resolve. He turns his furious gaze back to Suzuki, demanding to know why he is laughing. Suzuki calmly explains that while he did deceive him, Mimi's smile has nothing to do with it. His anger finally spent, Garaga kneels. His hand, which had been a threat moments before, now rests gently on Mimi's head as she laughs with unrestrained joy. He remembered her smile. It was a smile that could forgive him, even for what he had done. The memory washed over him, taking him back to a time 30 years prior. He recalled the constant taste of salt in his mouth, a bitterness he thought had ruined his senses. But seeing the young Mimi, her face alight with joy as she played in the snow, he realized he was wrong. In that memory, he embraced the small child, a profound truth surfacing from deep within him. He had always loved her. As the memory consumed Garaga, Suzuki watched, identifying the technique he had employed, Puritisu's 48th ultimate artifice, Radiant Smile. Overwhelmed by the force of his own emotions, Garaga collapsed, kneeling before Suzuki with his head pressed to the ground. The crowd erupted in confusion. One spectator shouted that it was a lie, while another pointed out that Garaga was crying. The skeleton guard noted in disbelief that the great warrior was on his knees, and Ornio added that it sounded like he had just confessed to Suzuki. Garaga remained on the ground, his words not meant for his opponent. Suzuki simply smiled, replying softly that he understood. The Wolfman referee, looking utterly bewildered, raised his hand to make the official call. He announced that since Garaga was crying and had confessed to Suzuki, he had no choice but to declare Suzuki the winner of the match. At his declaration, a large portion of the crowd, including Nefra, Kill, and Mel, burst into thunderous cheers, celebrating the unexpected victory. And so, the duel between the two came to a quiet close. While some in the crowd still debated whether it was a true confession, and others, like the Catgirl executive, watched with disapproval, the contest was over. On a later day, Nefra addresses Garaga, who stands before her. She observes that he is leaving, mentioning the thunderclap dash. The lizard man simply confirms her observation. She presses him, asking if he plans to join another unit and where his destination lies. Garaga lets out a short, dismissive laugh, stating that he no longer belongs anywhere and that her words are foolish. With that, he turns his back and begins to walk away. Nefra calls after him, questioning where he could possibly go if he has no destination. Meanwhile, Suzuki and his companions discuss the duel's outcome. The horned woman with the crescent moon on her forehead remarks that Garaga's reason for withdrawing was that his taste had vanished, an explanation she cannot comprehend. Suzuki quickly corrects her, insisting that Garaga wasn't upset about losing the match. He continues, a knowing smile on his face, adding his belief that Garaga will no longer eat humans. His companions react with confusion, questioning his certainty. Mel exclaims that the exchange between the two fighters was strange, but Suzuki, grinning, explains that it felt as though they had reached an understanding. He thinks to himself that Garaga has now set off on a journey. He feels certain that the lizardman's first destination will be the place where he can find the young girl from his memories. Inspired by this, he clenches his fists with renewed determination. He declares aloud that he, too, must take a new step forward. His determined face is reflected in the polished surface of a crystal orb. An unseen observer, holding the orb, remarks on how well he has managed to survive. The observer is revealed to be the goddess, who looks on with a troubled expression. She considers his survival to be unexpected, and muses that in his current state, he is almost useless for the task of saving the world. She mused over the rules of her own making, lamenting the high difficulty level she had set. This meant she couldn't intervene quickly, forcing her to write numerous reports. Furthermore, she acknowledged a critical limitation. She was unable to send any more heroes to this world. Her gaze fell upon the distant realm, a world where the local populace would have to fend for themselves and do their best to survive. With a solemn expression, she declared her intention to bestow a divine oracle upon her true apostles. Internally, however, she couldn't help but feel it was all a great shame. As she spoke, she released streams of celestial energy from her hands, commanding her followers to accept the power she was granting them. Elsewhere, one of her attendants turned to a messenger, her expression grim. Well, she began, it's come to this. Her attention returned to the scrying orb, her finger tracing over the image of Suzuki. Despite her frustrations, she admitted to herself that she was glad he was still alive. Turning away from the orb, she approached a grand, ornate set of doors. With a determined look, she announced that the age of humans would soon arrive. With that proclamation, the heavy doors slammed shut, sealing her away.